It's an average day for Class 1A. They're just strolling through a shopping district, having fun, buying gifts and food, defending themselves from a gang of villains. Yep, an average day for Class 1A. Except it's not, because something happens. Izuku fights the villains, but is swatted aside by one of them and into a random civilian girl trying to flee. There's a jolt of light between them, and then they both fall into a deep slumber. In the aftermath, the two are taken to one of the hospitals, but the doctors find that not only are the two, both Izuku and the girl, in a seemingly permanent vegetative state, but they cannot keep the two apart without causing physical pain to the both of them. Class 1A worry about their friend, and then even more so when they learn about the girl, whose name is Ayumutachi, and her quirk, Dreamwalker, allowing her to place people into a deep slumber and interact with their dreams. Supposedly, at least. The only problem is that she shouldn't be able to use it. She hadn't been using it since she turned 6 years old. Class 1, A's fears continue to grow. One of their friends being under the effect of a quirk is one thing, but being under the influence of an untrained and untested quirk is another. There's no way to understand how Dreamwalker works nowadays, and there's no proof to say that either of them will wake up anytime soon, or even ever. Ochako, in particular, fears for Izuku's safety and takes his hand into her own, and then collapses onto the floor, falling into the same sleep as Izuku and Ayumu. When she opens her eyes, she finds herself in a world unlike anything that she had ever seen. The sky was green and black and red. The grand buildings around her were golden and riddled with statues of all might and heroes in Class 1A themselves, and the rest of the world was of rolling verdant hills and fields, but they were all covered in smoke and fog. Fungal overgrowths covered the fields and buildings, and the entire world had fallen to rot and decay. Glowing purple chains lashed the world together and kept everything in place like a possessive prison, and constant murmur of despair and sorrow flowed with the wind that flowed between the buildings and pushed through the smoke. She was in Izuku Midoriya's mind, having made contact with him and inadvertently interacting with Ayumu's Dreamwalker quirk. She wanders the world, lost in the fog and fungus, and trying to find her way through the decadent ruins mottled with disease and rot. Everything was falling to decay, the rot constantly growing around her, slowly inching up the shallow rivers and broken golden walls. Whenever she approached the rot, she felt sick and fatigued, so she made an effort to avoid them. Eventually, she comes across a specter, a shadow of Izuku, and when she gives chase to the fleeing specter, she comes across a cloudy echo floating in the middle of the Icor model street, colored red and black and pulsating like a heart. She presses herself against the echo and finds herself in a memory, standing in a room with a young Izuku and his mother as they watch All Might's debut for the 100th time, only for it to shift to the doctor's office, where Ochako finds out that Izuku, much to her confusion, was designated as quirkless. Then, she's back in his room, and she's sobbing alongside him and his mother when he asks if he can still be a hero. Ochako says that he can, and is shocked when her mother just apologizes. The memory ends, and suddenly, Ochako wants to know more. He was quirkless, but he had one of the strongest quirks she'd seen? What the hell did that mean that he suddenly didn't? She goes for another echo, but stops herself. She needs to find the specter of her friend. She needs to help him, but she can't, because a shadowy figure with glowing purple eyes grabs hold of her and forces her out of Izuku's mind. She wakes up once more, slumping upwards next to Izuku and Ayumu, surrounded by her classmates who all fret and worry over her. She explains what she has seen to them, and they realize that they themselves can enter Izuku's mind via the Dreamwalker semblance, by making contact with Izuku and possibly anyone who was connected to the Dreamwalker quirk. The only thing that they needed to worry about, though, was a strange specter within Izuku's mind that had forced Ochako out. So, with determination in their hearts and a mission to save their friend right before them, they pressed their hands against Midoriya and each other and entered into his mind, into his dream world once more. From there, the class would go on to explore the strange dream world, sifting through the rotting corpse of the Grand Kingdom, moving through Spoke, and melding themselves to the strange geometry and physics of the new world that they had stepped into, avoiding specters and chasing ghosts. And time after time, they would begin to piece Izuku's life together through the echoes, looking through the cloudy bubbles and walking through projections and seeing his life laid bare before them piece by piece. Slowly, through random memories through different corners of his life, they would begin to understand Izuku, seeing his struggles and the damage that he has accumulated all his life. And with the 8 ghosts shrouded in shadow guiding them along, the ghosts of the power that they know now not to be superpower, but one for all, they are sure that they can save their friend. But tensions begin to flare in the group when Bakugo's past treatment of Izuku is revealed to class, and they begin to divide on the subject, causing old resentments within their group to flare up. However, despite their disdain, they are forced to swallow it down and move on. But then they are confronted by the angry specter with purple eyes from before, which proceeds to thrash them all in a fight. Worse yet, she is aided by her following of Midoriya's nightmares made manifest. The Phantoms of Stain, All for One, Shigaraki, and Overhaul fighting alongside mysterious Spectre Shadow as Class 1A charge at the nightmare villains, and are promptly beaten solid. They are left bloody and broken on the ground, but clear strike from one of the students is able to clear the mist away from the Spectre and reveal the foe that stands before them. Ayumu Tachi, draped in moonlight and standing firmly against them, with a simple demand: leave them alone. They were wrong. Ayumu has full control over her quirk. Ayumu is in full control of the dream world. Ayumu is this story's villain, not a victim. And with that, the class are expelled once more from the dream world. We cut over to Ayumu, who returns to a small cottage in the middle of a land of rolling plains atop a tall hill, giant purple chains flowing out from the roof and stretching across the sky. Inside the cottage is Izuku, sitting alone in a chair, looking down with his eyes dulled over. Ayumu is holding him here, in the dream world, fondling over him and treating him as if he is an old friend, a lover, even. Here, in this world of her that she can change and mold with a snap of her finger, she has made her gilded cage around her captive, a heaven within a broken hell, a slice of healthy flesh underneath peeled layers of truth and diseased skin. She holds him here and treats him to theater shows where she is the actor and he is the audience. She showers him with gifts of the mind and the greatest presents. All she asks for in return is for him to stay with her for as long as they live. A few seconds later, something begins to fill in the vials next to her. Blue liquid. Taking them, Ayumu pulls out a sample of the fungus from before and pours the blue liquid onto it. It has no effect. Suddenly, something begins pounding on the door, and Ayumu grabs her weapon, promising Izuku that she will be back in a few minutes, and leaving him in darkness once more. Meanwhile, Aizawa and All Might find the class waking up from their forceful slumber, and the former begins to chastise them for once more running into a situation without any understanding of what is actually going on. He has the class share their information with him, and All Might. And when the class leave, he prepares to have a group of specialized pro heroes go into Izuku's mind and pull him out. All Might wants to go, but he's lost his power. He won't be of any help, and Aizawa would like to just open up Ayumu's eyes and negate her quirk, but she needs to be awake for that to happen. And even if he did, her quirk is still relatively unknown. For all he knew, he could shut down her quirk and leave Midoriya brain dead as a result. However, he plans to go with the pro hero team into Izuku's mind and shut down the villain. All he needs to do is get a good look at Ayumu when she appears to repel them, and that might get the results they need. Or leave young Midoriya brain dead, like you said. Either way, I don't have any other plan, and I'm not dragging the problem children into this. They've already done enough on their own, without my permission. I won't risk it. Soon, the pro hero team of mind specialists and combat retrieval experts arrive, and with Eraserhead, they all connect with the Dreamwalker quirk and go in. However, right from the start, everything goes wrong. Izuku's mind begins to turn against the pro heroes. The specters of Midoriya that had once guided his classmates begin to attack the pros, and things only get worse when Ayumu and her collection of nightmares appear, which begin to overwhelm the pros. But then, everything goes wrong when Ayumu peers into Eraserhead's mind and pulls out his biggest nightmare, the massive villain known as Garvey, the one who had killed his best friend Shirakumo. The pro heroes attempt to flee from Izuku's mind, but Ayumu does it for them. By the time that they are expelled from Izuku's mind, they are far worse off than Class 1A, tired and traumatized. Meanwhile, Class 1A, now knowledgeable of Izuku's history, begin to argue amongst themselves about what to do, as well as Bakugo's past and One for All. However, when they learn of Aizawa and the pro hero's failure, they compile all that they already know and have recently learned about Izuku, and realize that the reason that the Spectres assisted them and turned against Aizawa and the pros was because Izuku simply didn't trust adults. He had been hurt by them so much that as soon as they had entered his mind, he had worked to expel them. But those of Class 1A he trusted. He trusted them with his life. That was why they had let him in. Realizing that there is no other way that they are going to get Izuku out of Ayumu's grasp, Aizawa, with a healthy degree of reluctance, agrees to allow Class 1A to enter into Izuku's mind once more, and though All Might wishes to enter with him, Aizawa orders him to stay behind. They made contact, and entered into Izuku's mind once more, except they didn't. Class 1A open their eyes, and suddenly find themselves in another world, one of rolling hills and grassy plains under what should have been a clear blue sky, with white pillars and towers piercing the heavens like knives, and islands that hovered in the air and created great waterfalls that turned into twisting rivers that slithered through the atmosphere. But it was covered with the same fungus from before, the same perpetual rot, and the sky, instead of being a clear baby blue, was mottled with smoke and fog. Giant purple chains filled the spaces between the clouds. They were in Ayumu's mind, seeing the opportunity to learn of the villain that they face. Class 1A, guided along by the spirits of the past One for All users, able to cross over into Ayumu's mind thanks to Izuku's connection to her, begin to pilfer the echoes and seek their secrets out. And with that, the life of Ayumu Tachi was laid bare before them. When Ayumu Tachi was born, she was an incredibly sociable child. She had always interacted well with other children and had been eager to talk and socialize, as well as comfort those around her who felt pain and sorrow. When her parents took her to see a quirk specialist, they discovered that she had some sort of mental quirk, though they do not know what it is. At best, they believe that it is something to do with dreams, though they are still unsure. However, that wouldn't matter, as soon Ayumu would begin to interact and share her semblance with another girl, a lone quirkless child by the name of Eiko K's. Ayumu and Eiko stayed as best friends for all their lives, playing and living their lives together for as long as they could remember. Eiko would help Ayumu with her studies and deliver to her sweet treats, and Ayumu would allow Eiko the chance to offload her stress and trauma from her torment of being born quirkless, before the two of them would be connected via Ayumu's Dreamwalker quirk, which Ayumu kept to herself and Eiko, and never revealed to anyone else out of solidarity with her friend. And they would dance in the dreams that they made with each other all throughout the night. However, as they continued to grow up, Eiko began to face more and more discrimination at the hands of bullies and thugs because of her and her parents' quirklessness. Ayumu would do her best to try and protect her friend, shield her from harm, but would begin to wear on the poor quirkless girl. The constant harassment and bullying that she suffered under would begin to break her down, and soon she would begin to grow more depressed and bitter about the world around her. The fact that the teachers didn't do anything about it, because of the customs of their culture, didn't help at all. Soon, Eiko would grow to become an unpleasant person to be around, but Ayumu would be the only one to realize that it was just a front to protect herself. Her parents would be fired from their jobs because of their quirklessness, and would be left poor and destitute. Ayumu would offer Eiko the chance to stay at her place, but Eiko would break contact with her, out of fear of her bullies targeting her only friend as well. But it was too late, and Ayumu would begin to suffer at the hand of Eiko's bullies as well, finding red spider lilies on her desk and facing mocking gestures and beatings from the thugs. Sometime later, a fire breaks out in Eiko's home, but Ayumu would be the only one to intervene. Thankfully, no one saw her pull her friend out of the fire, but no other hero had been there to save his parents. No one else had intervened because of the law, and after saving her friend, the police had actually held Ayumu back from saving Eiko's parents, demanding that she wait for a hero to come and save them. Apparently, All Might was nearby. He would save them, but he didn't. By the time that he arrived on the scene, Eiko's parents were already dead. Ayumu is traumatized by the event, and Eiko even more so. When All Might tries to comfort them, the two don't respond. Ayumu brings Eiko to her house, but her parents don't want a friend there. They want nothing to do with the useless, quirkless girl. Ayumu disregards them and allows her in regardless. But Eiko heard their words. Oh, how she heard them. Soon, Eiko would say that she felt sick and stayed home. Ayumu would go to school in the meantime, but when she got back home, she found in silence. She opened the door to Eiko's room and found her hanging from the ceiling, a noose around her neck and her shoes on the floor. Ayumu screamed. When the ambulance arrived, it was already too late. Eiko was dead, and Ayumu could do nothing about it. Worse yet was the fact that one of the paramedics seemed to dismiss her dead friend entirely because of her quirklessness. But then All Might showed up once again and tried to comfort her. He didn't even remember her. Ayumu explodes at him. She demands that he leave her, and he reluctantly does. Worse yet, she begins to gain scorn and ridicule from the people around her for daring to push aside the #1 hero himself. The next day, she is back at school. No therapy, no comfort. She heard a group of her fellow students, the same group that had bullied both her and Eiko, laughing about the death of Eiko, saying that it was good that another quirkless stain on the world learnt their place and off themselves for the betterment of the world. They even implied that they were the ones that started the fire that killed Eiko's parents. Ayumu, in a blind fit of rage, grabbed the nearest blunt object and beat them bloody with it. The police are called, but in order to protect their image, the school cover up the incident and the charges are dropped. Ayumu is still sent home, and her parents harangue her for wasting her time on the memory of the quirkless girl. Ayumu is left alone, traumatized by what she saw, and punished by others for simply trying to do the right thing. She is left to wander the world after her parents threaten to kick her out into the streets if she ever tries something like that ever again. All she does now is spend her days wandering the city, listlessly and uselessly. When All Might retires, she can't help but feel a little happy. But then, when the inciting incident of the story occurs and the strange green-haired boy is thrown into Ayumu, her quirk activates on reflex. She hadn't meant to draw him into her mind and dreams. It had been purely accidental. But what happened next wasn't. Waking up into a strange new world of shadows and darkness that she didn't recognize, Ayumu found herself surrounded by 7.5 shadowy figures. Ayumu sought to protect herself from them, trying to drudge up as much of her quirk as she could, until she found herself surrounded by a million echoes, and then she knew everything. Everything about Izuku Midoriya. As Ayumu's quirk changed and evolved around her, amped up as a side effect of Izuku's connection to One for All, it began to muddy and block Izuku's connection to One for All, and soon they found themselves in the middle of Ayumu's mind. Their dream worlds both plagued by the dark fungal growths that threatened to consume them all. And she saw him. She saw the real Izuku Midoriya. Not the cheerful, helpful boy with a strong quirk and a perpetual smile on his face, but a broken, depressed child with no power of his own, slumped over, catatonic, dead-eyed, and haunted by his own nightmares. You're like her, so much like her, a broken boy of a system that exploits him, of a world that abuses and kills him simply for being himself, for being born the way that he is. The way that you are, you've had no one your entire life. No one to comfort you, no one to love you, no one to protect you, no one to tell you that it will all be okay. Izuku says nothing. Ayumu smiles, her own eyes dead as well, and she wraps him into a tight hug. Don't be afraid, my dear. I'm here now. I'll be the one to comfort you. I'll be the one to love you. I'll be the one to protect you. I'll be the one to tell you that it will all be okay. I'll be the one there for you, for now and forever. She let go of him and smiled down at the boy. All I ask is that you stay with me in this little slice of heaven forever. Ayumu kissed him before trapping them both in the strange world that encompassed them, with their nightmares as their wardens. When the echoes ended, the students were left in shock. They now shocked at the torment that she had gone through, the horrors that her quirkless friend had suffered, the fact that there had been so much discrimination against the quirkless and those who associated with them, the fact that Ayumu's friend had killed herself, the fact that All Might hadn't even remembered her. But more than that, they now knew who Ayumu was. She was a villain now, to be sure, but almost everything that had led her to this point had hardly been her fault. She was a villain, but she was also a scared girl who was damaged, broken, and trying to fill the gap in her heart where her friend once was. But she was still a villain, and was holding their friend captive, and she needed to be taken down. That being said, they did realize one fact. Ayumu didn't have nearly as much control over this world as they, and even she, thought she did. One for All, through Ayumu's new connection to Izuku, had evolved her quirk in ways none of them had ever imagined, and that meant that there were now strengths and weaknesses in the foundations, ones which the spirits of the past one for all users could help them exploit. Furthermore, they remember Aizawa's account of his battle in Izuku's mind, and how Ayumu had pulled his nightmare of Garvey out of his mind, and realized that their minds were also connected to Ayumu's quirk. So, they reason, is it not possible for them to use the same powers as Ayumu in the dream world? With the help of the past one for all users, the class are able to unlock the powers of the dream world needed to overcome Ayumu and the seemingly invincible nightmares, gaining some new snazzy outfits as well. And with a knowledge of where to find them thanks to the memory echoes they have been pilfering, come up with a plan. Half of the class, the ones not that close to their comatose friend, that being Shoji, Ojiro, Sato, Koji, Hagakure, Jiro, Denki, Siro, Mina, and Tokoimi, would go what seemed like the most important parts of Ayumu's mind and reign held alongside the seven spirits, drawing her attention to them and away from Izuku, while the rest of the class, those closer to Izuku and thereby having the better chance of reaching out to him and breaking him out of whatever vegetative state he was in, being Aoyama, Ochako, Momotsu, Ida, Todoroki, Bakugo, Kirishima, and Mineta, would follow the purple chains and make their way to the cottage where Izuku was being held, freeing him and getting him and the rest of them out of this nightmare. The only problem with that plan was that they didn't know how to leave the dream world. They had only left before because Ayumu had ejected them from the mindscape. With no other choice, the class agreed to carry out the plan. Meanwhile, Ayumu has transformed the cottage that she holds Izuku in into a coliseum, with the two of them, just Ayumu really, watching the nightmarish projections of Nine and Muscular battling each other below. The two mindless phantoms tearing into each other only to heal immediately afterwards. Ayumu tries her best to enjoy the show, but can't help but keep her attention on Izuku, still in his comatose state, not saying a word, not saying or doing much of anything at all. Why? Why was it that was keeping him in that state? Did he not want to be there? It shouldn't be. He shouldn't want to go. This was their piece of heaven, and even if he did want to leave, he would have been vocal about it. So it had to be something else? Had separating him from One for All, a horrible quirk by the way. Why one would consider a quirk that did nothing but break their bones a blessing, she would never know. Somehow damage his mental state. Or was he suffering from waking nightmares of his own? The phantoms around her began to close in and whisper horrid things into her ear. With a shaky breath, she waved them away. Then something called to her, and the Colosseum turned into a cottage of chains once more. Apologizing to Izuku, Ayumu vacated the cottage and left him on his own once more. And then we see what has been haunting Izuku this entire time. Himself. A malicious, villainous version of himself, made from all his deepest regrets and fears. It prods at him, mocking his beliefs and ideals, and threatens to break him in twain for his failures and weaknesses. Izuku tries to defend himself. Oh, how he tries, but the malevolent image of himself is relentless. It will have what it wants. In time, it will have Izuku broken. In Ayumu's mind, the class that had been sent away to cause chaos were doing just that, with the assistance of the One for All spirits, the specters from Izuku's mind, and the new powers that they had unlocked within the dream world. They began to tear apart the landscape, destroying hilltops and burning fields, and leaving devastation in their wake. In the wake of their destruction, Ayumu arrives to rain hell upon them, pulling nightmares of villains out of Izuku's mind to stop them. In the ensuing fight, Ayumu would find herself suddenly overwhelmed by the sudden leap in power that the students were showing, and it was only when she pulled the nightmare Gigantomachia out of Mina's mind did the fight finally begin to stalemate, only for Mina, thanks to the powers of the dream world, to grow herself to enormous size and begin to deck it out with a phantom of the giant villain. Oh my God, she just punched that kaiju in the face. Go nuts with the dream world fights. But then, Ayumu senses something else, and leaves the nightmares to keep the heroes busy. Meanwhile, the other half of the class are busy following the purple chains in the sky to the cottage, but had to contend with the nightmares that were wandering the lands and trying to get in their way. Soon, they reached the cottage, but had to sneak past the lumbering nightmares that were trying to break down the walls. Upon getting into the cottage, they find Izuku in his catatonic state. But no matter what they do, nothing is able to get him out of whatever slump he is in. He won't respond. They look to the side to see Ayumu standing near them, a fierce glare on her face. He never does. Using her quirk and the powers of the dream world to restrain the 9 students, Ayumu explains that she has been trying to heal and care for Izuku since she accidentally brought him into the dream world, doing her best to treat whatever wounds he seemed to have been inflicted with, whether it be by others or himself, but so far nothing seemed to be working. He was still in the same depressed state as he was since they first arrived, and Ayumu didn't understand why, but that was okay. No healing process was quick. She smiled and says that she doesn't care how long it takes. She would heal her love and the damage that had been done to him, and she would leave him happier than ever. Nearby, the empty vials fill with that same blue liquid. As Ayumu takes the vials and pours their contents into a series of syringes, one of the students asks what the blue stuff is. It's my love, or rather, it's positive emotions, as scant as they're around here, turned into liquid. A few seconds later, she injected the blue liquid into the fungal overgrowth that had begun to creep into the house, only for it to have no effect, just like before. The students make the connection. The fungus isn't just some sort of malicious corruption. It's Izuku and Ayumu's despair given rotten form, their depression, grief, and regret made manifest. The students try to convince Ayumu to let Izuku go, but she refuses. As the phantoms around her begin to grow their forms and whisper to her, Ayumu declares that she will not let Izuku go, not while he's still in pain, not while he still needed her care. And when he doesn't, Ayumu has no answer. She simply takes Izuku into her arms and slips out of the cottage, content to let the nightmares of Himiko, Wolfram, the exam robots, and the sludge villain deal with the students, before attempting to remove them once more from the dream world, as she and her captive slip down into the deepest reaches of their minds for protection. All the while, Izuku's dark double began to grow in power, feasting on the despairing fungus around them and growing in strength as it continued to torment him, and Ayumu's nightmares continued to grow in tandem. After defeating the nightmares in the cottage, the students are saved from being forced out of the nightmare by the 7-1 for all spirits, and they contact their fellows and order them to regroup. Now, they would give chase into the deepest part of Izuku and Ayumu's shared connection, into a fortress of black steel and stone, guarded by the worst of their nightmares, including Overhaul, Shigaraki, the Nomu, Kurogyri, Muscular, all for one Stain, and a mutated, monstrous Bakugo Katsuki. In a 2-pronged assault, those students from before, the ones not that close to Izuku, launched multiple attacks around the fortress, drawing out the guards and forcing them into distracting confrontations, all the while the other half of students, those more close to Izuku, breached the fortress gates, fighting their way past the mutated nightmare Bakugo to get into the fort and rescue their friend from within. Inside the deepest depths of the fort, Ayumu's nightmares begin to take form and torment her more, taking the shapes of her former bullies and those who had led to her friend's death, and even Neko herself, all of them blaming her for her friend's death, to which all she can do is scream and cry for them to stop. Meanwhile, all Izuku does, all he can do, is watch as the monstrous form of himself, the villain he could have been and still could be, begins to form before him, whilst another nightmare begins to take a monstrous, yet familiar shape. As the students have fought the nightmare Bakugo, continue to push through the fortress, and climb down into its murky depths, they realize that the fungal growths from outside are beginning to spread, putting all of them at risk. Soon, they come across a massive hall, surrounded by dark pillars and shapes around a central podium. They find Ayumu and Izuku on the ground, their heads in their hands and their bodies writhing as the agony of the nightmares continue to weight down on them. The students try to save Izuku and get him out of the dream world, but neither he nor Ayumu hear them. Their nightmares are too strong. Then one of the nightmares looks to them and smiles. It introduces itself as Izuku Midoriya, the superior Izuku Midoriya. Behind him, the nightmare of All Might emerged, and they began to spew the most toxic speech that they had ever heard. All of the worst aspect of quirkless hate, disparaging and villainous talk. These nightmares are representations of the worst parts of Izuku and Ayumu's minds, The villain is Izuku for the original's internal quirkism, lack of self-worth, and self-sacrificial tendencies, and All Might for Ayumu's regret, self-loathing, and guilt for not preventing her friend's death. And then the two nightmares combine into a horrid amalgamation of monster, fused together into the worst aspect of both hero and villain, and representative of all that is wrong with their world. The students go to war with the amalgamation, but it proves to be too powerful for them. It is as if the monster itself is invincible, unable to be deterred by any force or blow. Everything begins to go wrong. The students outside the fort are almost entirely consumed by the fungal rot, and are forced to retreat into the fortress for protection. Within the crumbling fort, the battle is going even worse than ever, and the amalgamation of nightmares proves to be too much for the students inside to handle, even when the rest join in the fight, and a class attack on a united front. The amalgamation of nightmares is just too much for them to bear. That's when they realize why they can't defeat the nightmare amalgamation of the villainous Izuku and All Might like they could the other nightmares. It isn't just some sort of trauma, but a collection of all of their regrets and negative traits. It is Ayumu and Izuku given a new form. And as such, Ayumu and Izuku are the only ones that can defeat it, not the others. So Class 1A reach out to Izuku. They begin to share their happiest memories of him, the ways in which he's helped them, inspired them, made them into the people that they are now. But when it proves to not be enough, the spirits of one for all lend their support and pull a memory out of the ether, a memory of his 16th birthday, surrounded by his new friends in Class 1A. With his mother at his side, and Eri hugging him, Hatsum and Shinso celebrating with him alongside his new mentor, Yagi Tashinori. Slowly, Izuku begins to pick himself up, but Ayuma doesn't. She can't. She's too consumed by her own regrets to. I know about Eiko. Ayumu stops. So do the nightmares around her. I know that your friend died, and I know that you wish that you'd saved her. I know that you're scared and alone and angry and in pain, and that you just want your friend back. But Ayumu, trapping someone in your own mind is not going to bring her back. Nothing will. She's gone. Ayumu, I'm sorry, but Eiko's gone, and we both know that she would not want her dearest friend, her only friend, to do this to herself and others. Nothing. Ayumu, please. Nothing at all. So the class and spirits pull another echo of memory from the girl's mind and throw her into it. However, before they do, the memory begins to change and form around one of her nightmares, and it begins to change, not into a nightmare, but into a living memory. Ayumu, Eiko. The living memory of Eiko. As the dream world burns and collapses around them, Ayumu and Eiko have one last conversation, exchanging the goodbyes that they never got to share. Ayumu is tearful, knowing that the girl before her is not the real Eiko, just a collection of memories pulled from her mind. But the memory of Eiko tells her that it is enough, that she is real enough to tell Ayumu that this is not what she wants of her best friend. When Ayumu asks why she left her alone then, Eiko says that she didn't die because she was angry at Ayumu. She could never be angry at Ayumu, but she couldn't see the same anger consume her friend. She couldn't see the same pain kill her too. Ayumu cries in her arms. She can't let go. She can't let go of the pain. She's come too far. She's gone too far. She's not strong enough to do so. Yes, you can. Ayumu, I know you can. You're one of the strongest, kindest people that I know, and I'll be damned if you can't break out of this. This isn't you, Ayumu, and we both know this. You're better than this. You're better than them. You're better than the people who hurt you. Don't pull yourself down to their level just because you're in pain. Be better than them. Be stronger than them. I don't think I can. Yes, you can. You're strong. So much stronger than any of us. All you need to do is accept it. Eiko smiles and takes Ayumu's hands into her own. Ayumu, it's time to let go. Okay. Ayumu and Eiko smile, and they press their foreheads against each other. Eiko, my friend, I'm letting you go. The memory of Eiko begins to flicker and dissolve into light. Goodbye, Ayumu. Goodbye, Eiko. The amalgamation continues its battle against Class 1A, and it is winning. The students, despite all their new powers and all the help from the spirits, are completely overwhelmed and begin to drown in the fungal rot. The nightmares begin to tear them apart, Everything is lost. But then the fungus begins to change, transforming from black ichor into blue liquid. And in the center of the growing pool, Izuku and Ayumu stand side by side, wrapped in clouds of blue positive light. The sparks of one for all returning to the former once more as Ayumu restores his connection to the Quirk. The amalgamation panics and summons its nightmares to stop them, but it's not enough to stop the two. With Class 1A now recovered and ready to fight again, and the spirits of one for all at their back, Izuku and Ayumu, hero and villain, charge forward. The final battle is won, dreams versus nightmares, and it is a grueling battle. The nightmares and their amalgamation master are a force to be reckoned with, but the students and spirits are so much more, especially when they begin to bring forth their own memories into the fray. Ayumu teaches them all the method to conjure memories from the world around them, and from their own minds they begin to pull not nightmares, but positive memories bathed in blue light to battle the nightmares in front of them. For Uraraka, it is Gunhead Ryukyu and Nijire. For Kirishima, it is Fat Gum, Crimson Riot, Tamaki, and Tetsu. For Momo, it is Majestic and Kendo. For Bakugo, it is Best Jeanist. For Tokoimi, it is Hawks. For Ida, it is Manuel and Tensei. For Tsuyu, it is Selkie and Sirius. For Mineta, it is Midnight, Mount Lady, Kamui Woods, and Edgeshot. For Mina, it is Yoroi Musha and even Gigantomachia. The list goes on. An army of memories, born from positive experiences, against another army of nightmares. It is a war of memories, and in the center of it all, Izuku and Ayumu stand against the amalgamation and do battle. It is a long and grueling confrontation, and it is one that beats them almost entirely in the ground. But almost, because soon, with the power of their memories and allies at their back, they are finally able to split the amalgamation in two, separating the villainous Izuku from the monstrous All Might, and then finally ending them. The nightmares begin to fade, as does the dream world. Izuku and Ayumu's minds begin to heal, and as Class 1A wave goodbye to the fading memories, Ayumu says one last goodbye to her first and only friend, and then, finally, lets them all go back to the real world. They all wake up in a hospital room, and Class 1A is quick to celebrate their victory, joyous in the knowledge that they had saved their friend. However, Ayumu is not in the mood for festivities. She knows what is to come. Sometime later, she is being processed by police officers and is escorted away to be arrested for her crimes. Upon passing All Might in the corridor, Ayumu can't help but ask, almost rhetorically, if he even knew who she was. Yes, you're the girl who saved her friend from that fire when I couldn't, and the girl who had to witness her friend. Ayumu's eyes widened. He hadn't forgotten. I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for yours, too. Before she is led away, though, Class 1A catches up to her, and Izuku promises to put in a good word for her in court. What? Why? I hurt you. Yeah, you did. But you were also hurting as well, and no one else is doing anything about it, and I can't sit back when someone needs help. For Eiko, Ayumu smiled. For Eiko, thank you. And with that, Ayumu is led away, and Izuku and Class 1A promise to not stand aside while someone is in pain, or when someone is hurting, no matter who they are. They wouldn't let any more Eikos and Ayumis wander the world alone. They would be the sweet dreams that banished the nightmares. This they and the spirits that protected them decreed. One night, when the clock struck midnight, 10,000 children were abducted in their sleep. There was no flash of light, no sound to indicate their departure. 1 second they were just there, and the next they weren't. 10,000 children of all walks of life. Some were poor while others were prosperous. Some were quirkless while others had the most powerful quirks imaginable. Some were born to heroes, others to villains, and others in between. There was no pattern to the abductions, no secret sign or gleamed understanding. The only thing to note of them was that they were all children, and they had all been taken. Hero Society immediately scrambles to respond. Thousands of heroes are deployed on the hunt. Calls were made. Councils were held. Entire armies of government officials and workers were put on the hunt. And yet they found nothing. In another place, high up in the air, the children were held in ships that began to lower to the ground. Then, as the doors opened, those same children were forced out by soldiers and hunters in red and black garb. Think of them as the banished from Halo, out of the ships, and were tossed out onto the beach below. The trash-filled beach at Takoba Municipal Beach, outside of Mizudafu. Then, gunfire rips out from the ships and soldiers and into the crowd, cutting down dozens of children and forcing the rest of them out into the forest and into the city of Mizudafu. A city that was empty, ransacked, broken, flooded, overgrown, and left to rubble and ruin. From there, the 10,000 abducted children, now released into the empty urban and natural wildlands, are forced to go on a run from the army of bloodthirsty mercenaries, all of them looking to hunt them down and cull them like beasts. The first few days of the wild hunting game were marked by vast massacres and local extirpations, chaos filling the air as the streets and waters were stained with young blood. And in the other plane, the dead children will be brought back into their world, teary-eyed, broken, yet happy that they had returned. But the rest of the children did not know this. So through the wildlands and the forests in the city, they would go into hiding from the army of mercenaries as they were hunted down by the droves, massacres taking place over days until only a few thousand children would remain. Afterwards, the remaining few thousand children would be forced to adapt and mature in order to survive, developing their own tactics and strategies to overcome those hunting them or die trying. Some children would slip into depression and desperation, killing each other in bouts of mad rage and the need for survival as they fought over water, food, and clothes. Some went into hiding, becoming hermits, hiding away in cubbyholes and old homes, and refusing to step out under any circumstances. Some would even give themselves up to the hunters out of suicidal depression, only to be taken to camps and separated from the weakest to the strongest. The weakest of them were killed via firing squads and gas chambers, whilst the strong were taken away to camps and tortured for no reason other than the entertainment of their captors. The rest of the children, however, chose to fight back. It was determined that survival was better on their own or in small groups, so some children like Bakugu, Todoroki, and Yurashi become lone wolves, waging their own private wars against their executioners. Other children, however, rally around charismatic personalities, such as Midoriya, Yaoyorozu, and Uraraka. Some groups of children, like Midoriya's, focus themselves on helping other children and saving prisoners from the soldiers. Some, like Yaoyorozu's, would attempt to fight back against those hunting them and try to find an advantage against them. Others, like Uraraka's, would begin to surrender themselves to the desperation and bloodlust that came over them, and would become as violent and sadistic as those trying to kill them, devolving into nothing more than bandits and killers. But most of the remaining children would eventually hunker down and slip away into the cracks, too scared to try and confront the people trying to kill them. In the next plane, the heroes begin to work around the clock to rehabilitate the thousands of children that had returned to them after their supposed deaths in the other world, but find that there is something off about them, something different, something that should not be there. In the other plane, several groups of children find the remains of UA High School, its iconic structures shattered and crumbled, and begin to make camp within the old academy. Soon, the site will become a hub for many of the surviving children that have been taken, creating shelters and homes for those who have been abducted and had nowhere left to go. For a time being, things would begin to look up at the children as they began to rest, feed themselves, and make ready for the days to come. But then everything would change when Uraraka and her clan would capture one of the soldiers and drag them back to their new home. They would proceed to torture the mercenary, peeling off the armor and shucking the skin off their bones, cutting into them and breaking them, before they finally took off their helmet, and Ochako Uraraka found herself staring into the eyes of Ochako Uraraka. And that's when the truth is finally revealed. This isn't just a different plane of existence or other dimension that the children were abducted and placed into. It is a parallel universe in of itself. It is an alternate world where, during the past confrontation between All Might and All for One, instead of All Might winning and forcing All for One into hiding, here All Might was killed and All for One took one for all from him, becoming the most powerful quirk user on Earth. All for One would bring the whole world to ruin, killing millions and enslaving the rest of the world, bringing the heroes to their knees and taking their children for his own. Millions of children would be taken and trained into weapons, child soldiers, for All for One's reign, becoming the fist that would bring dystopian order to the world. However, years later, a global uprising would bring the world into a global civil war, devastating what was left of the earth and completely destroying society. All for One and his followers would be killed in the process, and all that was left would be the child soldiers that once enforced All for One's reign, filled with anger and rage and sorrow for all that had been done to them. However, they would soon find a survivor with a unique quirk, one that would allow them to look through parallel universes, and soon they saw the universes, and they saw themselves, their alternate universe counterparts, happy and cheerful, and living in comfort in their childhoods. This filled the child soldiers with rage. How dare they? How dare their lookalikes be happy when all that they had done was toil and suffer for years? They wanted to be happy. They wanted to live peaceful lives. They wanted their childhoods back. And they would make their counterparts suffer for what they did not have. And so the child soldiers, warped and twisted by All for One's cruel rule over them and locked in a childlike mentality due to their neglect and inability to grow up thanks to the man, abducted their 10,000 counterparts and dumped them into their universe, taking sadistic pleasure in making them suffer as much as they had, and beginning step one of their plan. The next step was to kill their counterparts, let their souls leave their bodies, and then fill them with their own. The children who returned to their original universe weren't really the same children from before. They were the child soldiers, taking their place in their lives. Realizing full extent of their parallel counterparts' plan to body swap with all of them, the children would have no chance to react as a massive force of these former child soldiers, now grown up, invaded UA and began a mass culling the children within, killing hundreds of children, inhabiting their bodies and sending them back to the alternate world, and forcing the rest back on the run. Realizing the threat that they now face and the risk to their friends and families back home, the children are forced to unite together against their new enemy. Against this grave new enemy, they finally gained the courage to stand up and fight against them for their lives back home. Because this was not just a battle for their survival, this was a battle for their souls. Izuku and Bakugo have gone missing. No one knows where they have disappeared to. No one knows where they had last been. 1 minute they had been with Class 1A on a field trip out to the biggest hero convention in recent Japanese history. The next, they were gone. UA panics, and Class 1A moved to investigate as well, but are stopped by their teachers. This is best left to the police to solve, and they didn't trust 1A to do anything on their own. Not after the Kamino Ward incident. This doesn't satisfy them, though, and half the class goes rogue to find them. Meanwhile, Izuku and Bakugo find themselves waking up in the middle of a dark hall, chained to the wall and unable to move. The members of Class 1A that had gone to find both Izuku and Bakugo spread out across the hero convention that they had last been seen at, but find themselves getting stopped by pro-heroes eager to interfere with their investigation. The students realize that they can't trust any of the heroes at the convention, and sneak their way into the convention place's security room. There, they find that the CCTV footage of Izuku and Bakugo has been deleted, but they are able to recover the file. They find that a group of heroes from the Peacekeepers Agency had kidnapped them and taken them all the way down to Dagoba Beach, a tourist site that had recently been cleared and reopened to the public. As they head to the site, they come across pro-heroes from the Peacekeeper Agency, as well as other pro-heroes and police officers aligned with them, hampering their path and keeping conventional access to Dagoba blocked off. As such, the students inform Aizawa and All Might of what's going on. Aizawa is furious at their disregard of orders, but upon discovering that the pro-heroes and police there are sabotaging the investigation, he moves to join them alongside pro-heroes that he knew that he could trust. Class 1A moving before him, sneaking around the pros and making it to the beach. They discover a secret entrance beneath the sand to an underground facility, but are stopped and attacked by the pro-heroes of the Peacekeeper Agency. Outmatched and outgunned, the students are forced to duck down and disappear underneath the secret entrance beneath them, into parts unknown. Back with Izuku and Bakugo, they are confronted by their kidnapper, a woman with a spider quirk who goes by the name of Black Tarantula. But she can't be. She just can't be. Izuku and Bakugo know this woman. Her real name is Kimi Kumo, and she is quirkless. Flashback to Izuku and Bakugo's shared past, and we see Kimi's part in it. She is an old childhood friend of the two, having been born at the same time as them, and sharing the same friends and classes. She had been quirkless like Izuku, and as such had suffered from the same harsh and brutal bullying that Bakugo had given her friend. As such, she and Izuku had grown extremely close to each other, even falling in love with each other at such a young age. However, while Kimi might be quirkless, her parents, whom were scientists and researchers, were not, and their work had taken her away from Izuku and Bakugo at the ripe age of 10. And while Izuku had eventually let go of his crush on her, Kimi had not, and stayed fixated on Izuku for all the years to come. Kimi's mother and father worked for the Hero Public Safety Commission, and spent much of their time covering up incidents of heroes committing crimes and working on genetic experiments and analysis for the organization, of which Kimi herself had a fascination with. Soon, she would be taking part in experiments as well, thinking up new designs and ideas as she grew into a progeny in the field of science and genetics. However, her quirklessness became a subject of debate amongst the HBSC higher-ups, and soon her parents and family were booted out of the organization on the grounds conspiracy. In reality, it had been because of quirkism in relations to Kimi's quirklessness. But Kimi's parents had an ace up their sleeves. They had pillaged the HBSC's files and hidden servers during their time in the organization, collecting vast documentations of crimes committed by heroes still in service that had been covered up. Counts of undocumented rape, murder, quirkism, and other atrocities had been hidden by the HBSC, and Kimi's parents had all on them on a single hard drive, but they would never get to use it. They would be murdered by Lady Nagant while she was still working for the HBSC, and Kimi would spend the rest of her life on the run. After months of hiding away in the shadows, and with a hard drive of crimes committed by heroes still in her possession, Kimi would end up finding something remarkable. An abandoned quirk experimentation site, forgotten by All for One in Ejiko years ago, and still filled with a plethora of abandoned quirks. Kimi will hole herself up in the abandoned site for months, experimenting on splicing quirks into rats, and then fusing multiple quirks into herself, turning herself into a spider-like hybrid and finally gaining a quirk. At the same time, she would spend much time spying on Izuku and All Might as they trained at Dagoba Beach through the hidden entrance hidden in the junk and rubbish that once littered the beach. However, upon looking on the news and seeing the UA Sports Festival and seeing Bakugo being proclaimed as winner, Kimi would decry the injustice of allowing a bullish thug become a hero, and when she sees Izuku remarking in surprise at his new quirk, as well as revolted by the damage that it did him, she decides to put her plan into action, converting the Peacekeeper Agency to her side. Kimi would adopt the alias of Black Tarantula and begin approaching agency after agency, showing the heroes within the contents of the hard drive and all the crimes covered up by the HBSC within. Converting dozens of heroes to her side, Kimi planned to release the information out to public, bringing down the HBSC and exposing hundreds of heroes for their hidden crimes. And now she wanted Izuku to join her, and for Bakugo to watch in punishment as everything that he held dear, the very ideal of heroism that he held himself, crumbled to the ground. Meanwhile, the students of Class 1A find themselves lost in the wide labyrinth that Kimi had built in the time that she had spent to herself, constantly hounded by pro-heroes looking to capture them for their new leader. Meanwhile, Izuku and Bakugo would protest and lash out respectively at Kimi's plan and demands, proclaiming that the documents and files that she planned to release would destroy faith in the pro-heroes. It could even bring down Hero Society itself. Kimi said that maybe that was the point. If a society could be brought down by a single document, then it was a society that didn't deserve to exist. With their conversation at an end, Kimi would drag away Izuku to begin the last stages of her plan, leaving Bakugo under guard her allied pro-heroes. However, the student of Class 1A would find Bakugo and, with the element of surprise, incapacitate the pro-heroes guarding their classmate and freeing him, informing them of Kimi's plan. Class 1A would move out to find Kimi and take her down, with all of Hero Society now at stake, their classmate in danger, and the sins of the heroes they had all looked up to now at threat of being released into the open. Class 1A would be forced to make a choice. Do they keep the information about these crimes hidden and keep Hero Society going on as it is? Or do they release it and bring these people to justice? This story will be a take on the classic. Izuku gains a quirk aside from one for all/overpowered Izuku Faisi, as well as typical classmates meeting before UA FIC. In this FIC, Izuku would meet Ochako before UA, and the two of them would become childhood friends throughout their time at Aldera. Things would go on as typical aside from that, right up until the sludge villain incident, where Izuku would undergo a late awakening of an extremely powerful quirk and defeat the sludge villain all by himself, destroying much of Aldera in the process. That's right, this FIC isn't a typical, overpowered Izuku FIC. It's a deconstruction of the entire genre. During the brief fight, much of Aldera High School was brought down by Izuku, and Bakugo is crippled in the fight. Realizing what he has done and how much destruction he has caused, Izuku goes into a panic and runs back home as the heroes try to pursue him, his quirk firing off wildly and causing massive amounts of property damage in the process. As he reaches home, Izuku begins to suffer from a panic attack, and as the heroes arrive to arrest him, his quirk wildly fires off once again. His home is destroyed, and his mother is killed in the process. When All Might arrives at the destroyed house, he finds a dead civilian, a dozen wounded heroes, and a catatonic Izuku holding the corpse of his mother, eyes empty and welled up with tears. When he takes the boy away, none of them say a word. Izuku is briefly held in a cell, accused of being a villain by the media, but it is All Might who is able to free him from custody before he is put on trial and sent to prison. Realizing his mistake in turning him away because of his quirklessness, as well as seeing how damaged the boy has become because of events that he cannot control, All Might agrees to train Izuku in better handling this new quirk of his, all the while trying to understand how it came about and why, as he is physically too late to be a late bloomer for a quirk. However, in the 10 months that follow, it is clear that this new quirk of Izuku's is both monstrously strong and horrifically impractical. Every movement of his has been increased tenfold. He cannot take a step without breaking the floor, and he cannot hold or grip on anything without shattering it. In fact, almost all of his time with All Might is spent not building up his strength, but toning it down, trying to dial it down and make his quirk more manageable. All Might soon realizes that he can't do this on his own, and is forced to bring in other teachers as well. Worse yet is the public response to Izuku's quirk awakening. Many in the media have already touted him as a villain, and many more in the public have joined suit. Many quirkless people have seen his quirk awakening and begun to try and awaken their own quirks as well, resulting in a rise of incidents in which many quirkless individuals would throw themselves into dangerous confrontations between heroes and villains in order to try and gain their own quirks, immediately resulting in more damage and spikes in violence. Not only all of that, but many ambitious heroes have begun to try and take Izuku into their own agencies, seeking to use him to strengthen themselves or take him into custody themselves, earning him a kind of attention from heroes that he never wanted. When Izuku is placed into UA, it is a bittersweet feeling. Because of the monstrous strength of his quirk, he is forced to stay away from the rest of the students in his year, and is giving Aizawa as a personal trainer/tutor. However, it soon becomes clear to everyone, Aizawa especially, that their usual methods will not work. Izuku's quirk is already beyond plus ultra, so their job will be to get it back down to just ultra before he accidentally hurts someone else. If he can't be a hero, then they can at least teach him how to control his quirk and progress normally in regular life. At least he still had Ochako in UA, though he kept himself as far away from Bakugo as he could. However, things in UA would begin to take a dark turn. The League of Villains attack on the USJ was more devastating than in canon, and the sports festival is interrupted by an attack from the LOV, resulting in numerous students being kidnapped. The faculty of UA are forced to deploy Izuku against the growing power of the Luage of Villains, as the situation worsens every single day. As he is sent to Hosu alongside a trio of heroes, Izuku is met by Ochako and Bakugo, deployed to find the hero-killer Stain with their aligned agencies. However, when Stain attacks Ida in the alleyways, and the Luage send in their Noma to join the chaos, the city descends into anarchy. Heroes mistakenly attack Izuku. Ochako is forced to defend him, only to be double-crossed by Bakugo as he rages against Izuku for crippling him. The Noma attack everyone, and Stain is recruited into the League upon seeing their successes and the folly of the heroes around them, earning Shigaraki and the League a wellspring of new recruits. After the messy battle concludes, the HBSC steps in and orders UA to hand over Izuku to them. A wide political gap between the HBSC and UA begins to form, and Izuku is forced into the middle. All the while, The whispers of a traitor within UA continues to grow. The League continues to somehow sneak spies and recruiters into school, and public opinion against Izuku continues to sway further and further away from him. His small circle of allies begins to grow smaller still, and only Ochako chooses to stay by his side. But things finally begin to take a turn when the training camp is attacked, and Bakugo is kidnapped. Izuku runs away to try and save him, and in the ensuing chaos of Kamino Ward, he is the one to bring down All for One, not All Might, at his victory, and with his new restraining control of his quirk, public opinion slowly begins to swing back into his favor. However, his actions earn him even more attention from corrupt pro-heroes and the HBSC. Eager to take advantage of the mentally wounded boy, many agencies begin to flood UA with recruiters and opportunistic invitations. Worse yet, the HBSC continues to request control of Izuku from UA, widening the gap between the two organizations and intensifying an already worsening situation. Izuku soon becomes desperate to get rid of his quirk, and upon discovering the existence of the quirkless bullets, he becomes eager to get his hands on one of them. However, when he discovers that the bullets were being made from Ares' skin and flesh, he goes ham on Overhaul and brings him down, almost destroying his organization and surrounding property in his rage in the process. Everything since then continues to go downhill from there as Ares is brought back to UA, but is scared of Izuku because of how badly he beat down Overhaul and everything around them. When the Paranormal Liberation Front comes to call and the war between heroes and villains begins, the combined forces of the new League of Villains is enough to break All for One out of Tartarus and bring him to the front lines, escalating the situation and bringing the fight to UA's doorstep. Eri and the civilians are forced to evacuate, and Izuku is sent to the front lines in order to even the odds. However, hardly anyone trusts him, and he is forced to fight on his own to prevent any casualties. When he is thrown against All for One, he tries to fight him once more, but All for One snaps his finger, and Izuku burns up, as Ochako runs to his side to try and aid the wounded boy. She looks up to All for One and calls out something that no one had expected. This wasn't part of the plan. Ochako was a traitor. Ochako was a villain within UA. As everything comes crashing down around them, All for One reveals the truth of them all, that a year before they'd gone into UA, Ochako had found and approached All for One, begging for help with her parents' company, which was filing for bankruptcy, and for Izuku to be granted a quirk, the strongest one possible. All for One had agreed to help, but only if Ochako agreed to be his man on the inside of UA. All for One had been the one to give Izuku his new quirk, and had been the one to save her parents' company from bankruptcy and poverty. As Ochako would soon explain, she had done it for them, and for Izuku. She had seen how miserable he was, how worthless he felt in the wake of all the quirkism and ableism that he faced every single day, and she had wanted it to end. So she granted him a quirk that was so powerful that it would put an end to the misery that he felt and allow him to become more than he had ever thought possible. It had allowed him to finally become the hero that he had always dreamed of. However, Izuku's reaction is of horror, not gratitude. His new quirk has done way more damage than good. It has effectively destroyed his life and killed his mother. It had ruined so much for him, and it had all been because of her. He's not grateful, he's furious. But before he can act on his anger, All for One steals back the quirk that he gave Izuku and leaves him for dead, reducing UA to rubble in the process. Now, with Hero Society on the verge of collapse, Izuku is forced to step up to the plate, quirkless once more, and defeat All for One once and for all. His awakening has come and passed, and now a new one is needed. For them all to survive, Izuku must finally accept his quirkless nature and understand the destructiveness that quirks can bring. It is an unexpected awakening, to say the least. Across the city of Tokyo, whispers and rumors of an escaped lab experiment are spreading through the streets. Worse yet, sudden attacks have begun to spread across the city, with civilians randomly attacking innocents, only for both parties involved to suddenly end the fights and part ways as if nothing has happened. Something is happening in Tokyo, and no one knows what. UA's classes 1A and 1B are sent to the outskirts of Tokyo, in Kijimi Ward, as part of a training exercise with a local hero agency. However, as they roam through the streets, Ochako finds a group of children huddled in an alleyway, all wearing hospital gowns, and all but one with glowing blue eyes. The one without accidentally nicks her on the leg in a panic, and Ochako gets up and walks away from them. As the next day rolls around, the heroes discover that the graveyard of Tokyo are empty, as in all the graves are empty, like the corpses had just dug themselves out and left. Mobs begin to form in the streets. The dead seem to be walking amongst the living. The faculty of UA quickly recall their students to the school as the violence in Tokyo begins to escalate. But then it stops. The mobs go quiet. Whatever the source of the chaos was, it is gone now. Unbeknownst to anyone, the mobs of living and dead have moved. Tokyo has been completely abandoned. It's now a ghost town. And meanwhile, Ochako hides away the children that she has smuggled into UA, cutting her wrist open and allowing her blood to spill into the school's food. Soon, similar acts of violence begin to spread across Musafatu, but at a much more accelerated rate. The dead are caught clawing their way out of their graves on CCTV, and the mobs of the living, covered in bloody wounds and bites and scratches, begin to prowl the streets in patrols and mobs, their glowing blue eyes on a prowl for anyone that they could turn to their side, hero, villain, and everyone in between. Soon enough, the heroes that have not become part of the mobs finally understand what is happening to the people below. They are all infected with some sort of Quirk-induced plague, a virus, a disease that is transmittable through transfer of blood and or fluids, a disease that controls their movements and actions, even their minds and thoughts, though for what and no one knows. But they are given no chance to act on this information. Ochako has infected half of UA's entire populace, teacher and student, with the Quirk virus. Some of those who have been infected, like Jairu and Kendo, retain their current forms and bodies, but others, like Hagakure and Mineta, are mutated by the virus into monstrous new forms. All of them turn to the will of the infected. As UA falls into chaos and civil war, Izuku and those who have not been infected flee from the hordes of infected living and dead, and UA and its surrounding provinces and wards are converted in a massive breeding ground for the virus, filled to the brim with infected. Anyone else that was infected with the virus was either hunted down and turned, fled the area, or sent into hiding. UA is made into the command and control center for the infected, and the children are brought out of hiding and into a growing empire of their own. It is revealed that the children are the escape lab experiments conducted by All for One and Dr. Ijiko to harvest their quirks and turn them into a new breed of Noma super soldiers. What's more is that all the children are already dead from those experiments, save for one, a small girl by the name of Kekitsuze, whose quirk allowed her to control a virus that tied everyone infected, living or dead, to her will. And this is where we get into the specific characteristics of the virus. While the infected disease still retained some previous skills and traits from their previous lives, it was the living that were the most dangerous. Instead of taking away their free will per se, the virus actually added something to their minds, an intense, overriding loyalty to the one holding the quirk. This meant that all those infected were still of sound mind and body, but united together in spreading the virus and serving their master, regardless of all their former allegiances. This made them the most dangerous of the infected, as they could think creatively in their actions and were completely united in purpose, much unlike those that opposed them. However, their limitations were from their master, Kekit. She might have an incredibly powerful quirk at her disposal, but she is still a scared child with significant trauma from her time as a lab experiment. She had only kept the dead children around her alive to serve as her friends, and had infected several people out of sheer desperation, and fear once she had escaped from where she was being held. That was how this whole mess started. Now, though, she's after the only thing that any child could ever want, a home and a family, as the infected, now united under the banner of the Taken Queen, gather around UA and slowly begin to spread out from Musafatu to beyond, spreading back across Tokyo and moving on to other parts of the country. The heroes find themselves overwhelmed by one of the biggest threats that they have ever faced. But soon a plan is formed to bring down Kekit's accidental rampage across the country. Across numerous fronts, entire armies of heroes stopped retreating and stood their ground against the hordes, beginning a long series of protracted sieges that bogged down and distracted many of the Taken Queen's armies. Meanwhile, a small strike force of heroes, accompanied by minor villains that knew the underground of Musafata better than anyone, would sneak into UA and capture Kekit, neutralizing her and ending her hold over the hordes. They succeed, but by a hair's thread. Almost everyone sent on the mission is infected, and they sound the alarm. The only one left, Izuku, is able to grab Keket and pull her out of UA before the infected can get to them. Izuku brings Keket back to the HBSC's headquarters, but soon realizes that they plan to kill Keket in order to stop the virus, and the fact that they no longer have the quirkless bullets in their possession makes things even more difficult. However, what none of them expect is for Keket's quirk to send a mental message of panic into every infected across the country, who swiftly abandon all their positions to march on the HBSC and the city around it. With an army at their door, the HBSC accelerate their plans to kill Keket, but realizing that there are too many variables that make killing her and ending the quirk virus less of a certainty and more an assumption, on top of refusing to bring about the death of a child, Izuku does his best to protect the girl as the infected break down the walls of the city and surge forwards, overrunning the hero's defenses and bringing even more into the fold, with the infected Ochako, now called the Taken, daughter, leading the charge. With almost all his friends now infected and the rest falling one by one, Izuku pleads with Keket to stop this madness before everything falls. But Keket cannot hear him. She simply stares out to the chaos and fire below, seeing all the death and destruction that has been carried out in her name. She can't release the people that have been infected with her quirk. She doesn't know how, and there isn't enough time to teach her. There's only one way now. She takes a knife into her hand and slices her own throat. Thanking Izuku for showing her kindness, Keket throws herself off of the HBSC building and onto the ground, killing herself. As the life leaves her, so does her quirk from the millions of infected, and one by one, her unwilling hold on them releases, but they still gather and mourn for her regardless, listening to her last words and comforting her as she dies. Ochako holds her hand even as her mind is freed, and as she finally passes, she and those that once belonged to her hordes carry her away to be buried. As the dead before and recently passed are collected and buried once more, the last of those still feeling the effects of Keket's quirk gather for a funeral, burying her not too far from UA before the last of Keket's quirk passes from them, and they all go their separate ways. Japan and UA would begin to rebuild from the chaos, but everyone would be shaken from it. Those that have been overwhelmed by the Taken Queen's virus still hear the whispers of the quirk from time to time, and those who weren't are plagued by nightmares of their allies attacking them and trying to spread the virus to them. An uneasy period of rebuilding takes place through a shaken Japan, and the public is left to mourn their losses and try to find themselves once more in a world that suddenly doesn't make sense. And deep in the labs, Dr. Ejiko would mourn the fact that he had been unable to harvest Keket's quirk for his experiments and his master's use before she escaped, an unforeseen development, but does not mourn for long. Shigaraki's power is already growing with each passing day. Soon that old quirk won't matter at all. The story begins as it does in MHA's canon, with All Might choosing Izuku as a successor and beginning his training to prepare him for the immense power of One for All. However, in the midst of the scrapyard that Izuku begins to clear at Takoba Beach, he finds a broken down and busted yellow Volkswagen Beetle, rusted over and marked to hell and back, but surprisingly still functional after who knows how long. All Might is surprised to see it here. The last Volkswagen Beetle was made 1,000 years ago during the Quirk Awakening, the time in which quirks had come into being in the immediate aftermath of a great apocalypse, but decides that Izuku and himself would take it and repair it themselves as a sort of side project alongside cleaning the beach. However, as they try to repair the car, they find that none of the components within make sense. There's so much compressed metal within, and in strange formations and patterns not consistent with the standard engine for Beetles, or even any other car. But when they try to switch on the car, they find that it's not a vehicle, it's a living being, a transformer. The Beetle converts right before their eyes into a machine, a robotic life form that towers over them, and then cowers away in the corner of the garage that they were fixing him in. Realizing that the robotic being is more afraid of them than they are of it, Izuku and All Might attempt to soothe the machine into not being fearful of them, and eventually are able to gain its trust and acceptance. Needing a name for the being, Izuku and All Might realize that the machine has no memory of what it once was. It didn't even have a voice to itself. They decide on a name for it, Bumblebee, who's in his G1 appearance, not the one from his signature film. All Might takes Izuku and Bumblebee to Island to give the Transformer, as they call the robot, the repairs that it needs, helped along by the artificial island's advanced technology. Here, Yagi Tashinori reconnects with David Shield, and Izuku meets his daughter, Melissa Shield, collaborating together to try and repair Bumblebee. The four of them dig to the few surviving records of the massive apocalyptic cataclysm that preempted the global awakening of Quirks over 1,000 years ago and discover scant records of metal men that walked the earth and brought it all down, barely stopped by the world's first hero. Not too far away, two AI known as Artemis and Moon, belonging to a secretive militant group, picks up an energy spike on the other side of the world. A Cybertronian energy spike. Sector 7 moves to investigate and intercept. Meanwhile, Izuku's mother is quick to pick up on her son's travels, and Inko quickly requests a meeting with the people that Izuku has been talking to. Soon, she meets with Yagi, not in his All Might persona, and the Shields, and quickly hits it off with them as she thanks him for doing what she couldn't for her son. Give him hope. They do not let her know about Bumblebee, though, in the meantime, Izuku and All Might continue to clear out the beach and scout out the area around them. They travel alongside Inko and the Shields to UA to explore the school and help David and Melissa build ties between Nizu and Island. Later on, Melissa and Izuku meet Mei Hatsum, and the three of them become fast friends, despite Melissa and Mei's constant disagreements about support items and the like. However, unbeknownst to them, scouts from Sector 7 begin to infiltrate Mustafadu and explore the city, trying to track down the Cybertronian signal from before. Soon enough, the day of UA's entrance exam comes to pass, and Bumblebee transports All Might, Izuku, and Hatsum to the testing grounds for the latter two's exams. With help from Melissa over the phone, the two are able to pass their exams as they did in canon, with All Might watching them from behind the cameras, and Bumblebee watching Izuku from behind the walls at the Mock City. But when catching sight of the point robots, as well as the massive zero-pointer, he has a sudden panic attack as a memory of a massive green titan flashes before him, and he flees the city in a hurry. Sector 7 catches trail and follow him out of the city. It is Izuku, Hatsum, and Melissa that catch up to Bumblebee first, and through sign language, as well as discovering how to use his radio to communicate with them, B is able to explain to them the flash that he saw, and they begin to piece together the life that he lived once before. But then they come face to face with a new threat, one that they're all shocked by. 3 other Transformers, one with a tank alt mode, one with cycle alt more, and one with a jet alt mode. They're the Viacons, known as the tank drone, cycle drone, and aero drone, and they attack Bumblebee with no mercy. E and the 3 humans are barely able to escape with their lives. The 3 humans and 1 Transformer are able to warn All Might of what they just survived, but strangely they all come up short on any incident reports of violence last night. Someone in the chain of command was keeping the incident quiet. The 4 of them try to make sense of the random attack, but are soon distracted by Izuku and Hatsum's first days in UA, with the 2 of them making friends in both the support and hero courses, though Izuku does his best to avoid the wrath of Bakugo. Soon enough, Class 1A is sent on a field trip to the USJ, alongside Eraserhead and 13. All Might is supposed to join them, but he's off doing his hero business beforehand and will join them soon. Bumblebee follows after them to observe, and soon enough, the League of Villains attacks, as is in canon. However, this time, they have another addition to the roster, another Transformer, with a red logo on his chest that had been marked and scratched out. His name is Wild Wheel, missing his hat and poncho, though resembling more of what he looked like in Last Spot Standing, and he desires revenge against those that have wronged him, and he makes himself known by picking up 13 and squashing her in his hand, killing her instantly. The students and Eraserhead are scattered by the villains and Transformer over the USJ and are hunted down and cornered one by them. Bumblebee calls All Might to tell him what is going on, but is forced to intervene when the Transformer, Wild Wheel, is about to kill Izuku, Tsu, and Mineta, tackling the robot to ground and beginning to engage in battle with him. Wild Wheel, however, tries to talk to the other Cybertronian, identifying them both as Autobots. They are brothers, kin, fellow Cybertronians. He must have seen what the humans have done to their kind. He should be just as angry as Wild Wheel. He should be just as angry at them for what they've done. He should be just as needy for justice as he is. Bumblebee doesn't listen. Wild Wheel had just killed a hero, a human, and tried to kill several more. Children, in fact. Whatever an Autobot is, Bumblebee knows that Wild Wheel is the furthest thing from it. The two Cybertronians engage in battle, with Wild Wheel trying to kill the organics, and Bumblebee fighting to defend them, even the villains. Everyone, from hero to villain, pauses in whatever they're doing just to watch the two metallic titans clash in open conflict. It is only when All Might appears to bring down those that attack the USJ that things go into motion once more. As All Might takes on the Nomu, several of the students identify Bumblebee as an ally trying to protect him and help him in engaging Wild Wheel, peppering the rogue Autobot with rounds and blasts and blows, and leaving him crippled and broken. They risk life and limb to bring the Cybertronian down, and as All Might finishes the Nomu off, Bumblebee does the same to Wild Wheel in a blind flash of instincts, adrenaline, and forgotten skills, by transforming his arm into a cannon and shooting the renegade Autobot in the head, seemingly killing him. As the students gather around the corpse of the giant robot in shock, Bumblebee comes to his senses and is horrified by what is done, transforming into his alt mode and fleeing the USJ, just as the rest of the heroes arrive to arrest the villains. Some of them attempt to go after him, but All Might stops him from doing so. This was something that he could do by himself. Meanwhile, the Japanese government contacts UA and informs Niza that an organization known as Sector 7 has taken away Wild Wheel's remains. Out in the wild, Bumblebee hides away on his own, still in shock over what he has done. But it is Izuku and Hatsum who catch up to him first, not All Might or anyone else. Through his radio and sign language, Bumblebee reveals that he didn't mean to offline Wild Wheel, and that he has been regaining more and more glimpses of his old life before Izuku and All Might has awakened him not too long ago. What he remembers is that his actual name is B-127. He is an Autobot, and he was a soldier in what was known as the Cybertronian Civil War, protecting the collection of allied Cybertronian colonies, both neutral and Autobot, and alien worlds known as the Autobot Commonwealth against the malicious Decepticon Star Empire, a fascist techno-estate that sought to cyberform hundreds of worlds and expand their empire across the entire galaxy, cleansing of organic life in the process. Izuku and Hatsum, more the latter than the former, try their best to repair the damage done to them by Wild Wheel, but are soon surrounded once more by even more of those Viacons from before, as well as new copter drones, artillery drones, sleek car drones. The Viacons in this story are a mixture of both the Beast Machine's Viacons and the Prime Viacons, as you can tell, and accompanied by elite heroes and human militant kill squads. Think of Sector 7's kill squads as like Shadow Company from Call of Duty. Bumblebee and the two heroes are barely able to run from the Viacons and Sector 7 heroes and squads as they gun for cover in the city, Sector 7 hounding them every step of the way. Meanwhile, Izuku and Hatsum's homes are raided by heroes and Sector 7 squads, and Inko and Mei's parents are arrested by them, taken away to an undisclosed black site somewhere else in Eastern Asia. Bumblebee, Izuku, and Mei flee into the corners and alleyways of Tokyo, but Sector 7 and their Viacons are constantly on their tail. They try to flee out of the city, but are cornered by the kill squads and Viacons in an abandoned part of the city. However, just before the Sector 7 squads can kill them, they are stopped and rescued by a group of cars driving out of nowhere and into the heroes, humans, and Viacons. A group of cars that transform into a group of Cybertronians, all of them with the Autobot insignia across their chests. The 5 Autobots protect Bumblebee and the 2 children, slagging the Viacons and incapacitating the humans. Seconds later, the pink Autobot in charge identifies Bumblebee as B-127 and leads him and the children away, out of the city and to safety in the wilderness. In the aftermath of the city skirmish, Izuku and Mei are declared as villains and enemies of the state by the Japanese government, much to the shock of their classmates. All Might tries to find out where Bumblebee and the children have gone, and learns that a group of heroes, supported by soldiers in unmarked uniforms, try to arrest the Transformer and the 2 children with him, and were supported by unknown machines of their own. However, he is stopped by HPSC officials each and every time he tries to get close to the truth. Soon enough, For his actions, he is confronted by a man known as Leonard Bishop, a man serving as a representative and leading figure for Sector 7. Leonard warns All Might not to get involved in Sector 7's dealings, and reveals that he knows that he's been harboring a Cybertronian fugitive. All Might demands to know what is going on, and threatens to reveal Sector 7's dealings, as well as revealing the existence of the Transformers to the world through his fame and connections. Most people would be cowed by this threat that All Might makes, but Leonard isn't. He laughs it off and reveals that Sector 7 has been covering up the existence of Cybertronians for the last 1,000 years. All Might's interference won't change anything about that. Meanwhile, in the Sector 7 black site in Japan, Inko and Mei's parents are kept in a cell as Wild Will's remains are brought in to be experimented on. With some scientists, they're believing that the remains might be the key to giving life to Earth's new champion. But for now, the prototype will be deployed on its first mission, to hunt down the Cybertronians outside of Mizurufu and eliminate them, as well as their human collaborators. Nemesis Prime, in his G1 form, is brought online. Meanwhile, in the wilderness alongside the shoreline of southern Japan, within a cave riddled with energon deposits and makeshift equipment, the Autobots' temporary base. Bumblebee and the two children are hesitant to trust the Autobots that just rescued them, seeing as how the last Autobot that they came across tried to kill them and their friends. The other Autobots are confused by this, especially when they recognize Wild Will as the one who had attacked Zuko and Bumblebee. He had been a staunch Autobot through and through, but upon coming to the conclusion that he had been forced thanks to the humans hunting them down, they are able to come to an alliance with each other, especially now that Izuku and Hatsum have become wanted fugitives. The other Autobots identify themselves as RC, whose design based on her IDW appearance. Their leader, Tailgate, again IDW design. RC's partner, Wheeljack, a blend of G1 and IDW designs. The resident scientist, Jazz, again G1 and IDW. The group scout and main fighter in Chrome Dome, primarily as IDW MTMT design. The resident Nemo surgeon. They reveal that they have been on Earth for over 10 years now, having come to the planet after tracking B-127's Bumblebee's signal. B-127's mission? To track down and locate Optimus Prime, who has been missing for 1,000 years. Bumblebee's mind flashes back, and his backstory is finally revealed. He is the last generation of forward Cybertronians before the third great Cybertronian Civil War began, and was there to witness the fall of Sentinel and Zeta Prime and their fascistic Senate, as well as the functionist regime that supported it at the hands of the Decepticons. However, when Megatron himself turned tyrannical and attempted to impose his will across Cybertron and her colonies, he joined up with the Autobot resistance alongside Orion Pax, now turned into Optimus Prime thanks to the Matrix of Leadership, become part of his inner circle and helping protect hundreds, if not thousands, of innocent and organic worlds and species from the relentless hordes of the Decepticons over the last 4 million years of conflict. However, when Optimus Prime disappeared, the Autobots were weakened and low on morale by his loss. The Decepticons used this loss in leadership to overrun and overwhelm major positions over the Autobot Commonwealth, ravaging entire worlds such as Clo, Athenia, Master, Nebulos, and Caminus, and forcing the Autobots to go underground, becoming resistant cells such as Springer's Wreckers, Ultra Magnus Remnant, Starsaber's Brain Masters, Atlas Circle of Light, and so on, and waging their own independent and scattered wars against the Decepticon Star Empire. However, without any major foe to oppose them and justify their unification, the Decepticon Star Empire stagnated and fell into infighting, with factions such as Skyquake's Predators, Nashtita's Predacons, and Bludgeon's Mayhem Attack Squad, as well as other factions under the rule of the Lights of Deathsaurus, Scorponok, Scrash, Thunderwing, and the Triumvirate, all competing for power amongst the Empire. All the while Megatron would sit on his throne on Cybertron. His underlings would take care of the management for him, and Starscream, alongside his Seekers, would go off picking off renegade Decepticon leaders, sometimes winning, sometimes not, and try to acquire power for himself to someday overthrow Megatron, to which everyone knows he will lose. Desperate to turn the tides of the war back into their favor, and eager to stop the Decepticons' casual genocides as soon as they can, what's left of Autobot High Command Dispatch B-127 to Optimus' last known location, being in the Sol System, some 100 years ago, to try and find him, but was intercepted and attacked by a squad of Decepticons known as the Monstercons, made up of Skullgrin, Submarauder, Iguanus, Bombburst, Bugly, and Finback. B-127 is able to fend off and kill the Monstercons as they arrive on Earth, but is badly damaged in the battle, losing his voice in the process, and takes the form of Volkswagen Beetle to hide from Sector 7 as their squads and Vehicons drag away the corpses of the Monstercons, and hides away in the garbage at Tacoba Beach in order to not be found by the humans. Now, with his memories awakened, Bumblebee, Izuku, Mei, and the other Autobots are forced to move through Tokyo once more in order to reach the docks, attempting to grab a ferry to I Island and seek shelter there. However, Sector 7 has anticipated this and posted guards around the ferry, forcing them to go around and seek alternate transport to the island. Luckily, they are able to contact Melissa and David Shield on the island, as well as All Might, and they arrange a private boat for them to take to the artificial island, allowing them to plan their next move in relative safety. However, before this can happen, a villain attack and skirmish between them and a hero known as Mount Lady causes massive amounts of damage to a nearby skyscraper, almost bringing it down and killing everyone inside. In a flash of instincts, Bumblebee leaps into the fray and holds the building up himself, allowing for civilians to be safely evacuated before it can come crumbling down. This surprises the Sector 7 forces, especially the one leading them, Marissa Fairborn and her two squad mates Xiao Xiao Li and Atari Hidotanari. Yes, the latter two girls and their association to Marissa Fairborn are a reference to Kiss Players, Goddammit, Japan. No, we will not be featuring any of the crap that went down in that bit of forsaken Transformers lore in this story. I'm just as traumatized as you by it, who already have their own reservations about hunting down the Cybertronians with impunity, and they take the chance to order the Autobot to be brought in alive instead of death, thanks to its very public and heroic actions. Soon, the Vehicons arrive to drag it off, and their new leader transforms from its truck alt mode to bring in Bumblebee. The bot in question lets his optics widen at the sight of the robot before him. He recognizes it as Optimus. The black and teal form of Nemesis Prime knocks Bumblebee out and drags him away, the Vehicons and Sector 7 forces following afterwards. Izuku, Mei, and the other Autobots are forced to leave him behind as they take the boat to I Island. At the Sector 7 Black site, the scientists begin to experiment on Wild Wheel's brain module, attempting to reprogram the module and insert it into Nemesis Prime. Once arrives with Bumblebee in tow, Leonard orders Marissa to explain why she hadn't killed the Cybertronian, and even when she explains that the robot had saved 100 people from a falling skyscraper, he orders Bumblebee to be destroyed and thrown into the pile. It is only Marissa's insistence that interrogating the Cybertronian may lead him to the others that keeps Bumblebee alive. In I Island, All Might meets up with the Shields, Izuku, Mei, and the other Autobots and discuss what has gone down. The Autobots come to the conclusion that the Optimus Prime lookalike that they saw in the city must be Optimus Prime himself, and see that the news is suddenly promoting the copycat as the newest champion of Hero Society, calling a grand convoy the Nemesis Hero, and saying that it is the next successor to All Might's legacy. Soon enough, Wheeljack realizes that Bumblebee's energy signature is still online, meaning that he is still alive, and he may, and the Shields track him down to an undisclosed location in the middle of the Japanese wilderness. Worse yet, Izuku and Hatsum learn that their parents have been kidnapped by Sector 7 forces, and are most likely being held prisoner there. With that, the Autobots and their allies form a plan to break into the Sector 7 base and free Optimus and Bumblebee, as well as the humans kept prisoner inside. All Might and the Shields would cause one hell of a distraction at the front gates, whilst the children and Autobots would sneak around the side and use the distraction to break in, freeing their fellows and parents from the humans, and bringing down Sector 7 and their copycat Prime in one fell swoop. The Autobots and All Might oppose the idea of Izuku, Mei, and Melissa tagging along with them, but upon seeing their determination and realizing that there would be no way of stopping them from following along even if they ordered them to stay behind, they agree to bring them along. At the Black Site base, Leonard orders a reprogrammed Wild Wheel Personality Core, as they call it, to be inserted into Nemesis Prime, now called Grand Convoy, the Nemesis Hero, and then orders him to be resprayed and painted. He was going to be repainted in whites and silvers with a teal and green finish. However, the reprogramming didn't work. Wild Will's personality hasn't been changed, and he's angrier than ever. Meanwhile, Marissa is interrogating Bumblebee, demanding to know where the rest of Cybertronians are. Bumblebee instead asks Marissa why she and the rest of Sector 7 are hunting Cybertronians, and why they have Optimus Prime in their employ. Marissa explains that Grand Convoy, or Nemesis Prime, or whatever it's called, isn't actually Optimus Prime. It's just a replica, a copy made from a combination of human technology and Cybertronian biology kept quiet by Sector 7 in order to serve as All Might's eternal replacement as a symbol of peace when his time passes. Then, she reveals as to why Sector 7 has been hunting down and killing Cybertronians for the last 1,000 years. Over 1,000 years ago, just before the first Quirk awakening, there was a massive cataclysm, an apocalypse of global proportion that devastated the Earth and left the human race in tatters. It was an apocalypse created by a Cybertronian invasion, when hundreds of the giant metal monsters descended from the sky and ravaged their world, intent on draining their world of their resources and bringing an end to their planet and species. Only one of the Cybertronians had objected and turned on his fellows, making it his mission to protect Earth from his kind and save them all. And that single Cybertronian was Optimus Prime. He single-handedly fought off the Cybertronian invasion and fell hundreds of his own kind, ending their domination and saving all of mankind. However, in doing so, he almost brought about his own end, and none of the surviving humans had any way or knowledge on how to repair his advanced systems, so they just put him on ice until they could figure out a way to do so. In the aftermath of the apocalypse, and with the first generation of Quirks coming into bloom and throwing what was left of society into lawlessness and chaos, Sector 7 was quietly founded by Harold Attinger. They would be a private military organization that would, in the shadows, would continue Optimus Prime's mission of safeguarding Earth from any more Cybertronian incursions, and would receive enough funding from the United Nations to become more powerful than even Interpol. Sector 7 would spend the next 1,000 years defending their world from every and any Cybertronian incursion upon their world, and would be responsible for the deaths of hundreds of their kind. Sector 7 would be continuing Optimus Prime's work in killing those who would bring harm to their world. It's Bumblebee's turn to speak, and through his radio, he asks if any of the Cybertronians they kill were Autobots. Marissa doesn't understand the question, so Bumblebee reiterates, did any of the Cybertronians that she's helped kill had red badges or purple? Marissa says that she's seen to the deaths of 10 red badge Cybertronians and 7 purple badge ones. Bumblebee swallows down the note of anger that builds within him and asks if any of the Cybertronians they killed ever tried to help others like Optimus did. Marissa doesn't know. Bumblebee would be the first that she met. Everyone else either fought, the purple badge ones, or ran, the red badge ones. Bumblebee asks if she ever considered the difference between the two. Marissa explains that they were taught that the badges signified rank in the Cybertronians' army. Purple were soldiers, red support. That was what they were taught in the academy. It was what the Sector 7 higher-ups had told them that they were, at least. It was a running theory. It was wrong, and Bumblebee explained it to her. The Cybertronian race was neck-deep in a civil war. The Transformers with the red badges were the Autobots, who served to protect the galaxy and the organic races within it from the Decepticons. The Transformers with the purple badges. Optimus Prime wasn't just an ordinary Autobot like B. He was the leader of the Autobots. The ones invading the planet must have been the Decepticons. Marissa is shocked by this information, but she doesn't quite trust the answer. Instead, she asks him about Wild Wheel, the Autobot who attacked the USJ alongside the League of Villains. Bumblebee doesn't have an answer, and Marissa is unsatisfied by it. She decides to investigate the matter herself and leaves Bumblebee to his cell, ordering Atari and Xiao Xiao to bring up all the files and mission reports on Sector 7's executions of Cybertronians over its history, including the classified ones. She doesn't care how many favors she needs to pull. Outside the base, All Might, the Shields, Izuku, Mei, and the Autobots scout out the base and find that they're camping out in an old factory/shipping bunker leftover from the days of the first Quirk awakenings, and find that the base is heavily guarded. 100 soldiers with automatic weaponry, another 100 in support, a dozen snipers overlooking the site, and a couple dozen heroes on their payroll. They've got Jeeps, Little Bird and Black Hawk helicopters, all 6 types of Viacons, APCs, mini drones in the air, and those read just on the outside. There's got to be twice, even triple the number inside the base. Suffice to say that Sector 7 has more firepower than a small army, and they're trained in killing Cybertronians and anything else beyond that. Pulling all their men and resources into a confrontation at the front gate isn't going to be easy, but nothing ever is. They're going to need one hell of a distraction. Luckily, All Might is one hell of a hero, and the shields are one hell of an inventor pair. In the base, the uploading process for Nemesis Prime is almost complete, but the scientists take the time to add in a fail-safe system into the artificial Cybertronian's personality core. They wanted their new hero to be lifelike, yes, but they also wanted him to be better than the Cybertronians that they had fought again and under their control. Meanwhile, Marissa would read over many of the reports that Atari and Xiao Xiao were able to get her, and finds dozens of classified and blacked-out reports of Autobots, the ones with the red badges, and even a Decepticon or two, the ones with the purple badges, going out of their way to assist and save other humans, only be gunned down by Sector 7's forces, who then framed the ones that the Cybertronians saved as villains, and executed them too. Horrified by what she has found and realizing that she has helped in the deaths of dozens of innocent people, humans and Cybertronians, Marissa and her 2 friends in the Force are given no time to react to the information as the Black Site comes under attack. Outside, All Might and the Shields, piloting mech suits made out of the point robots from UA, supplied to them by All Might, begin to wreck shop, tearing through Sector 7's vehicles and Viacons, and knocking down dozens of soldiers and hero mercenaries. Their attack succeeds in luring out the bulk of Sector 7's forces in order to combat them, but Leonard Bishop is quick to realize that the attack is just a diversion, and that All Might wouldn't risk his entire career just to blindly attack them. He orders Nemesis Prime to be deployed. Wild Wheel's consciousness within him is quick to take control and begins to override the failsafe around his personality. Nemesis Prime rolls out to action. On the other end of the facility is Zuko, Mei, and the Autobots carve their way into the facility and begin to sneak through the facility, eventually coming across Bumblebee's cell and freeing him, and then freeing Inko and Mei's parents. However, when they arrive at Optimus Prime's containment center, they are met by Marissa, Xiao Xiao, and Atari, who let them into the storage facility. Confused and expecting a trap, the children and Autobots cautiously enter the containment center, only to see the comatose body of Optimus Prime before them, laying on a wide table and in a new form that they hadn't seen him in before, looking patchworked and messy in construction. He was still alive, but was otherwise in stasis. Marissa explained to them that Sector 7 had been trying to bring Optimus back online ever since its creation, but it had been a slow process. None of them knew anything about Cybertronian technology, and even after learning about them after so many years, Prime's physiology was unique to himself in a lot of ways. They didn't know how to fix him, and didn't dare tamper with his internal components lest they might kill him. The best that they could do was a cosmetic overhaul. Wheeljack is able to explain this. Not only was Optimus a 0.1%er, being a Cybertronian born with a uniquely powerful spark, but he was also a Matrix bearer, having carried a matrix of leadership for 4 million years. Right now, he had a poor fuel substitute, synthetic energon created by Sector 7, running through his veins and keeping him on barely any power. He needed the real deal. Wheeljack opened his chest up to begin the repairs needed to move him, but find that his chest is empty. The matrix isn't there. The Autobots demand to know where it is gone, as it is an ancient relic of their homeworld, and of incredible symbolic importance to the Autobots and greater Cybertronian race. But neither Marissa nor her teammates know what the Matrix is. Neither do Izuku or Mei. Outside, All Might and the Shields continue their fight against Sector 7, but as reinforcements arrive, they find themselves, even All Might, find themselves tiring and wearing down. Meanwhile, Nemesis Prime approaches Optimus' facility, murder on his mind. The Autobots begin to donate some of their energon to bring Optimus back online, but find that he is still too damaged to move. He needs to be carried out, and with the amount of Sector 7 personnel crawling over the facility, even with Marissa's help, they won't be getting out without a fight. But then, something happens. Izuku places his hand on Optimus' leg as a sign of respect, and Optimus suddenly surges with life. In a flash of electricity, color, and light, Optimus' internal components begin to repair themselves, mending wires and soldering metal back into place. The patchwork metal covering him is paved over and merged with his body, and he is returned to a new body and form. Essentially, he's been transformed from his IDW Cybertronian body into his evergreen appearance. He awakens, but slumps over onto the floor, incredibly weak and in a daze, slowly coming to his senses and recovering. And that's when Nemesis Prime joins in the fray. The Autobots move to defend Optimus alongside the children and Marissa's men, alongside Artemis and Moon, sporting android bodies made from pieces of old Cybertronian corpses known as Cyberdroids and Marissa's agents. However, Nemesis Prime is too powerful, and when he states that he recognizes Bumblebee from the USJ, said bot realizes that Sector 7 have transferred Wild Will's consciousness into the artificial frame. However, just as he reaches Optimus, Wild Will's personality finishes overriding Sector 7's fail-safe protocols over his mind, and he declares that he should kill Prime right now. But he won't. As he scratches a Decepticon logo onto both his shoulders, he declares that he will force Optimus to watch as he will call the Decepticons to this world and take his vengeance on humanity, right before avenging the Cybertronians that they have terminated and killing Optimus Prime for daring to defend this planet, instead of letting the hateful humankind die out like they deserve. He is no longer Wild Will. He is Nemesis Prime, and he will have justice for his kind. Nemesis Prime leaves the Sector 7 facility and uses his connection to the Viacons to take control of the army of lifeless machines made from dead Cybertronians. Naming 6 of them as Viacon generals: Tanker for the tank drones, Thruster for the cycle drones, Jetstorm for the aero drones, Fearstorm, a Prime Viacon character for the car drones, Obsidian for the copter drones, and Striker for the artillery drones. And taking them all out of the facility, the newly christened Decepticon calls all the Viacons across Japan to himself and goes on the march. In the confusion, All Might and the Shields are able to get into the facility and meet up with the Autobots as they help Optimus up onto his feet. Leonard is quick to catch up to them with his own troops, and upon seeing Marissa and her 2 agents with them, as well as Artemis and Moon in their Cyberdroid bodies, is quick to declare them traitors to the cause and orders them to be killed next. However, when they see Optimus Prime alive and awake, they stop in place in awe and wonder. Optimus asks where he is, and a dozen voices cut in to try and share the details and their perspectives. However, it is Izuku who is able to explain to Prime what is going on. He's in a Sector 7 facility. He's been offline for 1,000 years. He's just been repaired and awakened, and the Autobots are trying to free him and the others from Sector 7's forces. Leonard is quick to fire back that they've been protecting Optimus all this time, not keeping him prisoner. They've been continuing Optimus' work for 1,000 years, defending their world from hundreds of Cybertronian incursions and bringing about the end of hundreds of Cybertronian invaders. However, Optimus is horrified by this news, and the final truth comes out to them. Before the cataclysm that brought about the global awakening of Quirks, Optimus had received word of an incoming Decepticon invasion of the Sol System, and had left with an army of Autobots to defend Earth and all the worlds in its system. The ensuing Earth War had been devastating for both the Autobots, Decepticons, and humanity. Thousands of Cybertronians had died in those days, and so had millions of humans. By the end of it, Optimus had been the last Autobot left standing, and he single-handedly drove off the last of the Decepticons by himself. But it had come at a cost. Optimus had been damaged to the point of death, and had involuntarily fallen into stasis. Before he fell, though, he passed off the matrix of leadership to an ally of the Autobots, a family of humans known as the Witwicky family, and founded alongside Harold Attinger. Sector 7 as a group dedicated to combating the Decepticons should they ever return. He had hoped that, in time, other Autobots would arrive on Earth to help repair their world and protect their planet from the Decepticons. Instead, as he learns now, Sector 7 had taken his intentions to the extreme and changed their mission statement to kill every Cybertronian that arrives on Earth, regardless of faction or intention, and then use their bodies to create an army of robots made out of corpses. And when he learns that they had created a copy of himself to serve as their new champion and propagator of that message, he is horrified even more. Leonard is shocked by Optimus' disapproval, and his forces are cowed, especially when All Might glares him down. However, when they receive reports of Sector 7's Viacons going rabid, Leonard and his loyalists use the opportunity to flee from the base and go into hiding. The rest of the Sector 7 soldiers, heroes, and personnel report that Viacons all over Japan and Eastern Asia are going wild, performing a mass exodus out of their bases and storage facilities and traveling fast to Japan, gathering on the shores of the country and amassing for what must be a grand assault. At their head was Nemesis Prime, realizing that Nemesis was about to try and wipe out all life in Japan, starting with the city of Musafatu, before spreading out to the rest of the world. The Autobots in Sector 7 realize that the only way to defeat them is to team up with each other and prepare for siege. However, the Autobots in Sector 7 are reluctant to work together, especially after everything that had happened between them, and how it was humanity's own mistakes that got them into this mess in the first place. It is Izuku, however, who points out the need to put aside their differences and work together, and when Optimus and All Might back him up, they are all able to come to an uneasy alliance. So, whilst Nemesis and his Viacon generals gather their forces for the coming assault, the Autobots, heroes, children, and Sector 7 remnants make their way to Musafatu to warn them. And as the threat of the Viacons becomes more and more clear, the city's defenders, heroes, police, and JSDF alike gather outside of Musafatu to defend it. Izuku and Hatsum are able to get into UA and convince Nizu and the staff to send out the point robots, including the massive zero-pointers, into defense, but are met with distrust and scorn from the students due to their status as wanted villains. The two of them ignore it and head back out to the front. As the Viacons almost reach the city, and as the heroes and Autobots finish setting up their defenses, Wheeljack, the Hatsums, and the Shields are able to jury-rig a massive force field over the city via Cybertronian technology, Island equipment, and stuff that Hatsum grabbed from UA. With this, the defenders are left on their own outside as the Viacons approach. And soon, the Battle of Musafatu begins. Artillery fire goes through the air, as do bullets and laser bolts. The Autobots are right on the front lines alongside All Might, Marissa's Sector 7 forces, and the rest of the heroes and defenders. The villain bots from UA are sent out onto the front line to soak up damage and draw the attention of the Viacons, allowing the heroes and Autobots to take them down. The massive zero-pointers throw fire and blast onto the horde of Viacons, whilst the likes of Mount Lady and Godzilla throw massive boulders and chunks of land into machines, before getting down and dirty and slamming themselves into the ground, sending shockwaves through the Viacon lines and destroying hundreds of them in single fell swoops. It is the largest battle ever seen upon the world. There haven't been fights like this since the days of World War II. The defenders, Cybertronian and human alike, give everything they have to defend Musafatu from the massive army of Viacons. But it isn't enough. The gargantuan zero-pointers are destroyed by Arrow and Copter drones, and Godzilla was felled by those same swarms. Mount Lady would run out of steam under fire and collapse, swarmed over by hundreds of Viacons. Even All Might would begin to tire, losing his energy and running out of time with each passing blow to and from him. And inside the domed city, all the people within, UA students and civilians and alike, could do was watch in fear as the defenders are beaten back by the Viacons. And that's when Nemesis Prime joins in the fray. Nemesis single-handedly kills dozens of heroes all by himself and leads his Viacon generals right into the fray. And then he lands a shot onto the makeshift force field generator. The domed shield around the city falls, and the Viacons surge in. The defenders' lines collapse, and the fighting turned from a full siege to street fighting. Entire buildings are destroyed. Skyscrapers are toppled over, and the civilians are caught in the crossfire. In UA, the Viacon general known as Fearstorm lands in the grounds, and he and his car drones begin to go to work, shooting up the place and reducing half of UA to rubble. It takes a combined efforts of both Class 1A and B to bring down and kill Fearstorm, and even then, half of them are badly wounded in the process. However, when Fearstorm dies, they realize that the rest of the car drones have become disoriented and weakened, losing much of their steam and becoming much more predictable. Warning the heroes of this, the message is sent out: take out the Viacon generals, and the rest of them will be weakened and lose much of their tactical advantages. Soon, the defenders reprioritize and begin to work on destroying the Viacon generals and bring in even more people to help destroy them and their subordinates. From vigilantes to civilians and even villains, everyone is brought into the fight. And in the meanwhile, the Autobots realize where Nemesis is going. He's climbing up the highest point in the city, being one of the skyscrapers, in order to set up a transmitter and broadcast his location to the Decepticons. Though the other Autobots and heroes are distracted by the Viacon generals and with defending the humans, Optimus, Bumblebee, Izuku, May, and Melissa catch up with Nemesis and engage him in battle, Optimus and Bumblebee keeping Nemesis busy, whilst the children sneak up to the shattered skyscraper all the way to the top, finding the transmitter almost about to broadcast to the Decepticons far away from home. Down below, the last of the Viacon generals is taken out, but despite losing much of their momentum, the Viacons are still a massive threat, and the defenders realize that the last thing keeping them together is Nemesis Prime. In the middle of the city, Optimus and Bumblebee continue to wail on Nemesis Prime, but he is simply too powerful for the both of them and too full of rage to listen to them. Up above in the skyscraper, May and Melissa try to find a way to dismantle and switch off the transmitter, but are stopped when Izuku applies the simple solution to the problem, a one-for-all empowered punch-of-kill-everything. The transmitter is destroyed in a burst of light and fire right before it can complete its broadcast, and Nemesis is left in angst at this, and more enraged than ever before. Now, with nothing else left to lose, Nemesis orders his Viacons to raise the entire city and everyone in it, and continues to throw down with Optimus and Bumblebee, beating them both to a bloody pulp. The tide of the fight turned when Izuku and All Might joined the battle, adding in their own punches and blows into Nemesis and buckling the metal. The opponents trade blow after blow on each other, shattering metal and steel, right before Bumblebee tried to land in a blow himself, and Nemesis punched a hole through his chest, seemingly killing him. Izuku flies into a rage, and with one last surge of energy, ends the fight in a single blow, planting his supercharged fist into Nemesis Prime's chest and completely destroying it, leaving a gaping hole where his spark should be. Nemesis Prime collapses, and the Viacons that he commanded shut down, either slumping to ground or falling to the sky. The defenders cheered their victory, but Izuku, May, and Melissa can find no cheer in them, not while Bumblebee is laying dead on the ground. However, Wheeljack is able to stabilize him and keep him alive, leaving the yellow Autobot to fall into stasis rather than leave them. The children cheer, but the mood is once more dampened when they see Nemesis Prime beside them, writhing on the floor in pain. He is dying. Izuku is shocked when he realizes that he has effectively killed someone, something that a hero is not supposed to do, but none of the Autobots hold it against him. Instead, they simply gather around Nemesis to keep him company as he dies, with Optimus holding his hand as he fades away. Here, Nemesis, Wild Wheel, finally comes to terms with what he has done and what he has helped do, and bemoans how far from the Autobot ideal he has strayed. He's seen too many good Autobots fall to Sector 7's, humanity's, guns, and he wanted justice for them. All he wanted was to avenge them. Wild Wheel dies inside of the body of Nemesis Prime, and all the Autobots can do is mourn the fall of one of their own. In the aftermath of the battle, Musufada begins to rebuild, though now with the existence of Cybertronians as common knowledge. Sector 7's dirty dealings is exposed to the world, and the organization is disbanded, with members like Marissa Fairborn and her 2 agents acquitted. However, those like Leonard Bishop, now going by the name of Silas, would go underground with their own caches of Viacons, forming the Cemetery Wind factions and continuing Sector 7's grisly work. The remaining Viacon, however, will be melted down and stripped for parts. That was the official story, of course, but in reality, many of them had fallen into the hands of rival countries, criminal syndicates, and hero organizations, beginning an arms race for Cybertronian technology in the face of the Battle of Musafatu. Meanwhile, the United Nations would reforge what was left of Sector 7 into the Earth Defense Command, or EDC for short, with Marissa Fairborn and her 2 agents Xiao Xiao Li and Atari Hidotanari in command. They would be working in conjunction with Optimus Prime and the Autobots in defense of Earth from extraterrestrial threats, though would find constant contention from Hido Shizuku Ameo, another KISS player's character. No, we are not getting Lou Don't Worry, the Japanese representative to the UN, and someone who had lost her daughter, Shizuku Ameo, to the Cybertronians during the Battle of Musafatu. Suffice to say, she had a good reason to hate the Cybertronians, regardless of whether they were Autobot or Decepticon. It doesn't help that Xiao Xiao and Atari have found evidence of experiments by Sector 7 around the process of binary bonding a human to what they called a Cybertronian transtector, and find blueprints for processes and functions such as a Headmasters, Target Masters, Power Masters, and God Masters. In the battle's aftermath, All Might would run out of much of the juice that he had been running on with One for All and would be forced to announce his early retirement. Luckily, he is able to acquit Izuku and Mei of the charges against them, and they are allowed to go back to UA as students once again, and even as heroes of the battle. However, they are still met with distrust from their peers thanks to their former status as villains and how they had gone on a run with Autobots. Some in their classes, such as Todoroki and Ida, would continue to express concern and distrust about the Autobots, especially if their relatives and loved ones were injured or killed in the Battle of Musafatu, but they would come across a Cybertronian who shared their concerns and wanted to see the Autobots pay for their crimes. And what was in it for him? Well, Starscream wasn't going to tell any time soon. In the meantime, Izuku, Mei, and Melissa are given temporary licenses and clearances to help the Autobots in their activities thanks to their public affiliation with them, and are made into honorary Autobots as well for their part in saving Musafatu. Their families move in with the Autobots as they are given a new facility, a new home and base, just outside of Musafatu, all to themselves, and are there to greet new Autobot arrivals as they emerge from hiding and or arrive on Earth. It would be Wheeljack the Hatsoms and the Shields who eventually repaired Bumblebee and brought him back online, though while they were able to repair his voice, the rest of his body had to be rebuilt from the ground up. Bumblebee would comment that he felt like a Goldbug, and then felt that the name had a nice ring to it. As such, Goldbug was born. Meanwhile, in the criminal underworld, new alliances are being forged and created in the wake of the battle and the emergence of the Cybertronians. Many villains like Spinner, Mr. Compress, and Twice would see and be inspired by the good that the Autobots are doing for the world in defending and rebuilding Musafatu, as well as exposing and bringing down Sector 7, and would decide to become vigilantes in their name, delivering justice onto corruption, and those that would do harm in the uncertain streets of the world. Those like Toga would see the chaos left behind and be enthralled by it. Others, like Dabi, would simply take advantage of the devastation left behind and begin to forge their own paths in the uncertainty of it all. Meanwhile, those like Stain would be approached by those who would seek to cleanse the world of filth. The Decepticon Bludgeon and his Mayhem Attack Squad, composed of Octopunch, Stranglehold, G1, Overbite, Smolder, Steamhammer, Thunderblast, Tuskmaster, IDW, and Fennec, Beast Wars Uprising, would forge an alliance with Stain and his growing number of followers to cleanse the world of false heroes and idols. Others, like Overhaul and Wolfram, would forge alliances with each other and grow to become powerful contenders in the fight to claim the criminal underworld for their own, especially after acquiring a number of Cemetery Wind squads and Viacons for themselves. However, other groups would engage in open war with each other, with the two groups known as Hummer Eyes and the Meta Liberation Army, now joined by 9 as followers, would begin to wage a shadow war with each other over the spoils of the Cybertronian presence on their world. Some would already claim those spoils. In a far-off corner of the world, the former Sector 7 scientists known as Giga and Mega would gather human allies in the form of Cancer, Wilder, Bullhorn, and the famed Darkwing mercenaries Buster and Hydra, and binary bond them to their own transtectors, as well as turning their cache of Viacons into a new army for them to help them revive a trio of Decepticons known as Blood, Doros, and Gilmer, and soon make their own claim on the world. However, the EDC and Autobots would be ready to counter these new threats, as already existing agents, such as a codenamed Lightfoot Ranger, and Road King would begin the work of building transtectors that suited them alongside the Autobots, whilst cadets like Minerva, Cab, and Shootago would begin their training to fight alongside the Autobots with their own transtectors. However, somewhere in the depths of Japan, Shigaraki bemoans the fact that despite everything that the League of Villains had done in attacking the USJ and attempting to kill All Might, it was these Autobots and Viacons, and even the shitty little green-haired boy from before that had stolen the spotlight away from them, and regrets ever bringing along that hulking piece of scrap, Wild Wheel. For all of his talk of his race's technology being far superior to anything on Earth, all of it was useless to him. However, All for One would calm him down and point out to him that this new era of uncertainty had netted them possibly hundreds of powerful new allies in the form of the Cemetery Wind factions, the likes of Hummer Eyes and the MLA, Mega, and Giga's faction, and all the people who hated All Might and the Autobots across the world. They had just been granted a slew of new possible allies. All they had to do now was reach out to them. And as Shigaraki and Kurojiri left to carry out his will and find those allies, All for One would feel the corruptive energies within him stir and smiles cruelly at the thought of one for all being passed down once again. And all the way on Cybertron, Soundwave would report that Autobot resistance movements across the galaxy has suddenly become more organized and motivated, and that their enemies are finally beginning to gain ground on them. He also reports of possible activity on Earth, and his spies within Starscream's ranks report the possible reemergence of Optimus Prime. The tyrant known as Megatron would stir for the first time in 1,000 years. But at the end, Izuku, Optimus, Goldbug, and their allies in both the Hatsums, Shields, Autobots, and Heroes would watch as the new arrivals to Earth gathered. The likes of Rewind and Ratchet, Eject and Whirl, Windblade and Hound, and so on, and would watch as the sun rose once more on a brand new day, confident that though it may seem like it never ends, whatever the future may bring, they could all face it together. And that's how Act 1 ends. I'm not too sure about Act 2, but I have a few threads and plot lines in place for what could happen then. 1. The Autobots and EDC would work to take down the Cemetery Wind groups across the globe, but would also foil a plot by Starscream and his Seekers to speed up the Cybertronian arms race between the various factions across the Earth and plunge it into a third world war. 2. Izuku, Melissa, and May would dig up evidence of growing alliance in the criminal underworld between the League of Villains and the Shia Psychi, meaning that the League have automatically become more powerful than ever before in the early days of canon. 3. We look through the villains' perspectives at a long-running plot, as we see the League come into conflict with both the MLA and Hummer Eyes, all before All for One brings them into fold alongside numerous Cemetery Wind forces. However, they themselves come into conflict with a growing vigilante alliance headed by Spinner, Knuckle Duster, Mr. Compress twice, and the Autobot known as Atomizer. For Goldbug finds evidence of corruption within the HBSC and Hero Society itself when he discovers that the HBSC has several kidnapped Autobot scientists in their ranks and are forcing them to build an army of Cybertronians under their control. 5. Marissa comes into conflict with Hido Shizuku over EDC funding, with the latter's demand being to freeze the Autobots out of the EDC, or they will go bankrupt. No, their solution is not a sexy calendar shoot. Kiss players is not going to be a thing. Get your head out of the gutter. 6. Izuku and May come under fire from members of both Class A and B at UA and are forced to come to terms with much of the stigma within Hero Society and the infamous phrase, once a villain, always a villain. Thankfully, they find comfort in the form of Drift, a former Decepticon named Deadlock, now a faithful and steadfast Autobot. However, this stirs a conflict of ideology between the Autobots and Heroes. 7. Izuku and May are sent to take some time off and relax by All Might and Optimus, eventually forced to sit out of the sports festival because of their injuries and the need to recover. However, when the sports festival is attacked by Stain, Bludgeon, and their Mayhem attack squad, the two of them leap into action to take on the villain and Decepticons. 8. May, Izuku, and Class A and B are sent off to train alongside the EDC cadets Minerva, Cab, and shoot alongside their mentors Lightfoot, Road King, and Ranger. However, when Giga and Mega's forces attack them, alongside the newly awakened Blood, Doros, and Gilmer, they must all work together to track the Decepticons and their human loyalists down before they can awaken a great evil known as Devil Z, a being that was thought to be killed back during the days of the first Quirk awakenings. 9. When Izuku, May, Melissa, and their Autobot friends come across a group of Cybertronians in pretender disguises, led by former Decepticon Thundercracker, they discover that a group of Cybertronian neutrals had deserted from their respective armies, Thundercracker, Cerebros, Cyberwarp, Slog, Kakuryu, Groove, First Aid, Tigatron, Arizor, Transmutate, and Rampage, and have also called themselves the Knights of Cybertron, have been hiding amongst Earth's people for years from their home base of Fortress Maximus, and have simply been trying to find a home for themselves. The humans and Autobots would have to defend the Knights from Starscream Seekers, before discovering that the Knights have a combiner on their side by the name of Grand Guardian, made up of First Aid, Groove, Slog, Kakuryu, Tigatron, and Cyberwarp, all of whom are parts of Combiner. After repelling Starscream and the Seekers, the Knights of Cybertron decide that while they won't join the Autobots, they will at least be careful allies of them. 10. Optimus Prime and All Might go on a brief sabbatical to locate the missing matrix of leadership, eventually discovering that One for All is itself the matrix, whilst All for One is a corrupted splinter of it. This puts the emergence of Quirks and their sudden link to the Transformers into question. 11. A bit of comedy-focused plot, but Izuku, Mei, and Melissa attempt to teach the Autobots the joys of Earth's various holidays. Shenanigans ensue. 12. Izuku finds himself with few allies in UA as a plot to frame him for the murder of a classmate is uncovered by the heroes and Autobots. Starscream's manipulations continue to seep into the school. 13. All Might and the heroes are informed of the League of Villains by Atomizer and the Vigilante Alliance, and realize that All for One has grown more powerful than ever before. 14. The Autobots and heroes rescue the kidnapped Autobot scientists, Iron Fist, Brainstorm, Perceptor, etc., from the HBSC, but that just encourages them to declare the Autobots and heroes that support them as traitors and mobilize their new Cybertronians and loyal heroes on the EDC and Japanese government, launching a coup of the country. 15. The HBSC and League of Villains go to war, and the Autobots are caught in the middle. The HBSC are brought low by All for One and Shigaraki, and the Autobots, UA, and the EDC are forced to pick up the pieces. 16. In the aftermath, All for One and the Decepticons go to war with each other, with Soundwave taking command of Giga and Mega's forces as his own, along with his cassettes. However, he and Starscream come to blows over leadership of the operation. Meanwhile, Detective Tsukauchi teams up with Nightbeat and Prowl to search for the League of Villains and their Cybertronian connections, eventually coming across a message from Silas calling for an alliance of all Cemetery Wind squads. 17. Devil Z is brought online, and he takes his Decepticon-loyal humans to the planet of Nebulos. The Autobots, EDC Transtector pilots in training, and Izuku, Mei, and Melissa are forced to go after them and fight the Nebulan Hive as they finalize the process necessary to binary bond the humans to their Transtectors. In turn, the Nebulan Rebellion allowed the pilots to binary bond with their Transtectors as well, becoming the first Headmasters, Minerva, Cab, and Shudda Goshooter, and the first Power Masters Lightfoot, Road King, and Ranger. Izuku, Mei, and Melissa are bonded to their own Transtectors and become the first Godmasters. 18. Silas had united dozens of Cemetery Wind factions into a united force by the name of Mech. Their first target? The EDC. 19. Whilst Devil Z returned to Earth, the Autobots and Transtector pilots discover that Scorponok has used the science of Nebulos to create his own army of Decepticon headmasters on Master, Weird Wolf, Fangry, Hoary Bull, Squeezeplay, Mindwipe, Skullcruncher, Apeface, Snapdragon, and Scorponok himself. 20. Bakugo wishes to challenge Izuku once again, but the green-haired boy has long since got over Bakugo's existence. At the same time, Sentinel Major arrives on Earth to try and spark up his old rivalry with Optimus Prime, refusing to accept that it was totally one-sided and Optimus has completely forgotten about him. 21. With his own minion and Scorponok's brother, Black Zarek, Devil Z's Decepticons make a bid for power on Earth, sparking a brief Decepticon civil war. 22. The League of Villains and Mech go to war with each other, and All for One welcomes Megatron onto Earth as an equal. 23. Megatron rallies the Decepticons to him and moves to take over Earth. He and Optimus clash on the battlefield, and the defenders of Earth are only just able to fend them off. In the middle of the battle, All Might and All for One come to blows, and All for One kills All Might. All the power One for All is channeled into Izuku, and he comes into contact with not just 8 vestiges, but 13 shadowy figures. Megatron kidnaps Izuku and invites All for One onto a ship, and the Decepticons depart for Cybertron. The Autobots learn that All for One and Izuku are actually 2 halves of the Matrix of Leadership, and the Knights of Cybertron reveal what Megatron intends to do. Kill Izuku and All for One, revive Cybertron's core, and turn it into a battle world fit to conquer the entire galaxy. But All for One himself is a corrupted portion of the Matrix, and is host to something else entirely. If that takes over Cybertron, then who knows what will happen. The Autobots, Transector pilots, Artemis, Moon, May, and Melissa go after them. 24. On the way to Cybertron, the Autobots are impeded by a pair of demonic beings known as Violent Jigger and Dark Nova, along with their army of Galaman and Novaroid drones. The Autobots are barely able to make it past them, as they declare themselves to be servants of the Chaos Bringer. 25. Entire armies of Autobots, alongside May Melissa, the Transector pilots, and the Earthbound Autobots, arrive to stop Megatron, but it is too late. Izuku and All for One are both killed by Megatron and fed to the core, spreading their energies all over Cybertron. However, All for One reveals himself to not be the corrupted shards of the Matrix, but to be the spirit of Unicron himself, having been separated from his physical body by Primus millions of years ago, and now takes the dead body of Cybertron for his own, reformatting it into his new physical form, and doing the same to Megatron, turning him into Galvatron, his servant, and all the Decepticons on Cybertron into his sweeps. Only Devil Z's forces, being mostly human Transtectors, Soundwave and his cassettes, Shockwave and Starscream, are spared. The Autobots and Surveying Deceptions flee back to Earth, and Dark Nova and Violent Jigger join their master as the Chaos Bringer feasts on the dead Cybertronian colonies, growing in size each time, before finally setting his sights on Earth. Meanwhile, the Earthbound Autobots and allies all mourn for Izuku's loss, but then realize something incredible. Izuku's spirit has somehow transferred to his Transtector, and he has become a fully fledged Cybertronian. 26. Back on Earth, the Autobots and Decepticons gather and are forced to unite with the Earthbound Defenders. As Unicron and his minions approach, the fight that breaks out between all of them is massive, and millions of Cybertronians are killed with each passing moment. As Earth is nearly consumed, Izuku and Optimus Prime commune with the spirit at the heart of Earth, the one who had activated the Matrix of Leadership so long ago, granted Earth the power of Quirks, and sent the energies of the Matrix into one for all. The planet of Earth transforms into the goddess known as Gia, who destroys Dark Nova and Violent Jigger, and does battle with her brother, Unicron. And as Optimus and Galvatron do battle for the last time, eventually killing each other, Izuku travels into the heart of Cybertron and, after summoning the powers of both the Matrix within him and the individual powers of every human from Earth/Gia, both quirked and quirkus, blessing them via the Matrix and Gia, and also summoning the strength of not just the 8 vestiges, but the 13 primes themselves, Izuku unleashes the purifying energies of the Matrix onto the spirit of Unicron, dispelling and destroying him, and freeing Cybertron from his corruptive malice, as well as the evils of All for One. 27. In the aftermath, the surviving Autobots and Decepticons watch as Gia, that being Earth, merges with Cybertron to completely reformate it, turning the once metal world into a techno-organic paradise, capable of supporting both organic and mechanical life. Realizing that they were so few in number now to justify continuing the war, and that Cybertron is even bigger now with Earth's added mass, the 2 current Autobot and Decepticon leaders, Goldbug and Soundwave, make peace with each other and declare the Third Great Cybertronian Civil War to be over, to which the Autobots and most of the Decepticons agree. Soon, Earthen and Cybertronian life is found repairing the damage that Gia could not fix, and thousands of neutrals, including the Knights of Cybertron, return to their home world. And while some former Decepticons, such as Starscream and Devil Z's forces, and former human villains, such as what's left of the League of Villains and Silas Mech, refuse to accept the peace and continue to go about their usual scheming ways, the majority of humanity and Cybertronians agree to put aside their differences to forge a new future together. The next big thing that humanity would need to get used to was their lack of quirks now, though. Thanks to Izuku's sacrifice in stopping Unicron/All for One and purifying Cybertron, all their quirks are gone now, zapped away when the magics of the Matrix leave them. 28. In the meantime, the last act of the story would focus on the mourning and funerals of Izuku, All Might, and Optimus Prime, and how their legacies would be the hope that the people of Cybertron, both human and Cybertronian, would need to look forwards into the future. 29. And in said future, a long time after great downsizing, A group of children, both humans, Maximals, and Predacons, would gather around the statues of Izuku, All Might, and Optimus Prime, and would listen to the stories of the elderly human/Maximal hybrids May and Melissa, accompanied by the Maximal and Predacon duo Artemis and Moon, as they recounted the tales of the three in statues and the stories of the final days of the Great War, and their adventures on the old world of Earth, adventures that were always more than meets the heroic eye.